Oh, hi there. I'm Rob Biernacki. This is Stefan Kesting. This is the De La Riva guard. And I've got an entire De La Riva guard system that Stefan has asked me to show, so we figured we might film it and show it to you guys as well. The NoGi De La Riva guard is distinct from the Gi De La Riva guard in that I don't have lapels, sleeves, belts to grab onto. So we're going to be going over some concepts in the first part of this series on how to make that work for you in NoGi. We're also going to migrate from the De La Riva guard itself to the DMX position, to the Mantis guard position, finally getting into the reverse De La Riva guard, and then going over how to make your NoGi De La Riva system leg lock proof, so how to avoid getting heel hooked, toe holded, estima locked, knee barred, all that kind of stuff.
So why do you include those other guards with the De La Riva guard? Are we just doing the pure De La Riva guard, Rob?
Well, no, we're not. And why I include those is any variant where we're kind of hooking behind the knee or the calf is a De La Riva variant. We want to give you a complete De La Riva system, and the De La Riva guard, whether it's Gi or no-Gi, is not a guard that you can play by itself with no others. It's not the closed guard where you can just wrap someone up and hold them there. It's any one of the sort of modern hybrid guards require a little bit of ability to transition from one guard to another. It's not something you can hold, indefinitely. So we definitely need to give you the ability to go from De La Riva to Mantis to reverse De La Riva as the circumstances dictate.
Awesome. Well, let's get started. So show me the first super cool submission from the De La Riva guard.
Slow your roll, Stefan. What we have to start with is some concepts and some theories. So in this volume, we're going to be going over some concepts specifically related to the no-Gi sort of open guard, how that is going to translate to the no-Gi De La Riva guard, and we're going to recap our overall Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu concepts that, if you've got the BJJ formula, if you've seen any of my work, you can probably skip those first couple of chapters, but if you haven't, you definitely want to watch these because
they're fundamental.
They're fundamental,
especially to your approach.
To my approach, but also like if you're missing these ingredients, I can promise you that your jiu-jitsu will change once you have these ingredients, regardless of whether you play NoGi De La Riva or not. Okay, so the first concept that we need to review is the concept of alignment. It's kind of an overall umbrella term that we use to describe base, posture, and structure. So in the past, I've used like the technical stand-up or bridging and hip escaping, like really fundamental jiu-jitsu movements to demonstrate base, posture, and structure, but I thought we would just go through it using the De La Riva guard. Sure. So base is our platform from which to apply and absorb force. Right? We say platform because it might be the mats, it could be the wall, sometimes it'll be my opponent. So for instance, to draw the distinction here, when we play the NoGi De La Riva guard, we generally don't keep our foot here as opposed to in the Gi just because of the footlock vulnerability. But in general, when I'm using my foot, I can generate base by putting my foot on the mat. Right? So if you were to start to try to push into me, if I don't have any good contact with the mat to absorb that force, right? Like if I were to start to turn myself that way, there you go. So I took my base, which was my back. My back was allowing me contact with the ground to push off, right? Like I'm in basically a leg press alignment, and it's allowing me to absorb that force. So as soon as the angle of my back changed, my base changed. Now if I want to add to my base, I put my foot on the ground, and now you go to push into me, and all of a sudden I feel a lot more stable. I take that foot away, you push into me, I'm less stable. So ideally, to have maximum proper base, I need to be able to generate the maximum amount of force I'm capable of and absorb your maximum force production. Anything less than that is a reduced sort of function of base. So it can be contact with the ground. I can, for instance, use contact with you to generate base, which I'll be doing to attack our shotgun sweep series. Sure. Right? And then posture is the integrity of the spinal column, right? So I could relate that to, let's say you go down to one knee and we're playing De La Riva guard from here. So one of the things that I'll generally do is check my partner's postures. If I grab your head and your posture's compromised, I can pretty much sweep you instantly. Yeah. Whereas if you've got good solid posture, now your alignment is sound, I can't affect you. And
so my spine is straight, I'm not all twisted up,
you're not bent over, you're not twisted, you're not compromising the integrity of your spinal column, so your kinetic chain, your ability to use all your muscles working together is intact. As soon as I compromise that, you become weaker, you become vulnerable to my attacks.
On the bottom in the De La Riva, most of the time your spinal column is going to be just reasonably straight.
Exactly. It'd be pretty hard for me to have bad posture when I'm on the bottom here.
Except I'm say leg dragging or something, and you're all twisted up.
And also like we're gonna go through. One of our volumes is gonna be on like defending common passes against the De La Riva guard, and in that case, the rolling guillotine style pass, which is actually very effective against this style of guard if you're not really aware of your posture and how to manage it. It's something you need to definitely deal with.
Okay. So then structure. We've got base, we've got posture,
Right.
we've got structure.
So structure is the efficient positioning of your limbs to achieve a goal. I usually use a push-up position as my example. So like structure would be if I'm externally rotating my hip too much. You'll see a lot of people play De La Riva guard that are quite flexible and they're able to absorb a lot of, if you slowly start coming, yeah, exactly. So when my foot here is kind of trapped, as this external rotation of my hip starts to occur, the alignment of my limbs to achieve the goal, which is, my goal is basically to manage the distance. That's true of any guard. So my goal is to keep you away, but also to keep you from running away. So I don't want you to push in, I don't want you to flee. As I start to externally rotate, that goal starts to become compromised. I'm no longer efficiently achieving the goal. I can achieve the goal with flexibility, but it's not mechanically sound.
If you're not meow, if you're not a...
Exactly. So to keep my leg in, again, referencing that leg press alignment, is what I would prefer. If I'm in the De La Riva guard, this would be good structure. This would also be good structure. Like this would be bad structure because my leg's just dangling out there where you can access a lever, which we're going to get to in a minute. But foot on the ground, good. Foot behind the knee, good. Knee turned in, not really extended open, right? Anything that allows our limbs to be in an efficient position to achieve the goal. So the goals will change, right? Like sometimes in jiu-jitsu, I'm going to want to stick my arm straight out, create a frame, block you. That's good structure under those circumstances. But if I was defending an arm bar, this would be pretty damn terrible structure, right? Like my structure would be keep my arm close to my body. So the structure changes the most out of the three. Base is pretty simple. You stick your foot on the mat or on your opponent or on a wall and you push. Or you push your back against the wall or the ground and you push. Posture, just don't twist your spine up, right? Like don't let your chin go to your chest. Don't let your ear go to your shoulder and don't point your shoulders in the wrong direction compared to your hips, right? You want to keep your hips and shoulders pointed the same way. Structure changes quite a bit, right? And only mat time will get you there. And the better your understanding of like physiology and like proper mechanics for things like weightlifting, like any sport you do, there's a proper form, there's a proper way to move. And that's really when we talk about alignment, that's what we're trying to give you. We're trying to align your body under every circumstance to generate force optimally. And the flip side of this, and we'll be talking about it in all of our attacks, is that I don't ever want to attack my opponent when they have good alignment. So when I'm playing my De La Riva guard, I want to have good alignment. I don't want my limbs akimbo, I don't want my spine twisted. When my opponent is in my De La Riva guard, whether they're attempting to set up their passing or they're trying to defend my sweeps or they're trying to prevent the submissions from happening, if their alignment is good and they're reasonably skilled, I'm going to have a very hard time. If their alignment is broken, it doesn't matter how skilled they are. If you take away someone's base, posture, and structure, the fact that they're a black belt is irrelevant because now they're a human being with broken alignment. They're weak, they're vulnerable, they can be attacked and submitted. So that whole concept of alignment is one that is really critical to our approach to jiu-jitsu. And it goes along with the concept of frames and levers. So we usually give people a quick definition, right? Like a frame supports weight. So I'm using my right arm in this case to support my weight. I could be using my shin to support your weight. If you were to lean in, I could support a ton of weight like this, right? So a frame supports weight and a lever magnifies force. So if I'm using, for instance, like with your leg, with your knee, let's say directly over your ankle, you're supporting most of your weight, so you're using a frame. But if I'm able to push your leg back, now I've accessed the lever and I can fairly easily tip you and sweep you. Whereas if I try to do that same tripod sweep motion at this stage, you wouldn't really move. Right? So a lever magnifies the amount of force that I can transmit into your body. And when we do jiu-jitsu, we're essentially playing a game of frames and levers where we want to switch frames into levers, levers into frames, or deny our opponent access to frames or levers. By using frames and levers, we affect our opponent's base, posture, and structure. We create vulnerability. What you choose to do with that is up to you. You can sweep, you can submit, you can punch someone in the face.
What about on the streets, brah? None of this works.
But then you just hit somebody in the nuts and that solves all your problems. You don't need to learn how to fight. All right, our next concept is the idea of range battles and understanding range battles, what they are. Every single exchange that we have in jiu-jitsu is going to involve a range battle. People tend to be familiar with the idea of range and striking, but people tend to also just refer to like grappling range. Yeah. There are many ranges that we can use, and every step, every exchange that we have, one individual is going to have a preferred range, the other individual is going to have a preferred range, and the winner of the range battle will determine, we'll be able to insist on their preference. So let's say if we're in the De La Riva guard here, this is sort of my preferred range. I want to keep you out here. If you start getting closer, like I have a series of like frames that I'm trying to utilize. So right now, you got close enough to me where you're affecting my posture, which means that my alignment is broken, which means it's not time for me to attack. We're gonna go over recovering alignment in a later video, but you won a range battle there.
Yeah. So in this case, I'm more comfortable in that close can opener range, so that was my preferred range.
That was your preferred range.
Alternately,
so you might want to flee, exactly. Yeah. You won the range battle, you got to your preferred range. If I don't recognize that every time there's a range battle, there's either a winner and a loser, or there's a draw. Right? If let's say we're here and you come in and try to grab my head, but I keep my posture, you got to the range that you wanted to, but you didn't affect my alignment. So this is fairly neutral. I maybe didn't want you to get that close to me. I might have wanted you out here, but because my alignment's fine, I can still perform some kind of action. Although because you've got a grip on my neck, we might cancel each other out. So this is fairly neutral. Sure. So before I go on to the next movement, like for instance, if I'm trying to push you back right now, it's a waste of time and energy for me to push you back, right? But if I break this grip, now I can start pushing you back. Right. So that subsequent grip break was the next range battle. I won that range battle, therefore I got to take the next positive step. So in every exchange we have, like this is extremely common in guard passing, where the guard player doesn't recognize that they've lost a range battle, and they continue. So for instance, if let's say you're able to shed my De La Riva hook and start moving to a knee cut here, and I'm still trying to like attack you, like that's completely unfounded, right? You've won the range battle. You've moved, again going back to the previous video, you've moved from my maintenance phase to your passing and my retention phase. So I need to be framing you, resetting my guard, and then as you come in to pursue again, I might be able to reset and then start to initiate my attacks. So knowing that there are range battles and that every single exchange we have will have a range battle that includes either a winner and a loser or a neutral scenario. If there's a neutral scenario, we have the next battle. If I lose a range battle, I don't go forward. And forward doesn't literally mean forward, it just means I don't try to progress. Yeah. If I've lost a range battle, I need to take one step, again, not literally necessarily a step back, but I need to regroup.
For example, in that knee cut scenario, we're not covering the deep half guard. You might decide to switch to the deep half guard.
Exactly. I might, yeah.
So you're taking a step in your preferred strategy.
A tactical retreat into the next safe position for me. Right? So, and that's why we've used the term range battles, and we put this almost in military terms, is that because when somebody wins an exchange, if you've got a machine gun and you're I make a tactical retreat, we go to cover, we regroup, maybe I call it an artillery, whatever. I've got to do something else. I don't just keep going forward and trying to do the thing I'm doing. I recognize that I've lost the battle, I need to reposition. Here's how we don't want to try to win the engagement phase. I did nothing there to win a hand fight, so if we were to replicate that and Stefan just batted my legs out of the way, I would have a huge problem on my hands. When we talked about the 3 phases of guard earlier, the engagement phase, it's critical that I win that phase, and I'm going to win it by winning the hand fight. So, in future videos we'll go over more specific details, but basically I want a 2-on-1, so like Stefan's hand is pointed down now, so I'd be gripping over top. If your hand were more open this way, I'd be gripping from the bottom. I might get a 2-on-1 with elbow control this way, I might get it this way. It doesn't really matter what I get, I need to have some kind of control of your upper body before I start trying to go after your legs. If all I do is go after your legs, now your hands are free, you might guillotine me, you might knee me in the face if this were a self-defense scenario, right? So I want to win the hand fight, pull you, this is shifting your center of gravity, making sure that this front leg is heavy. Now I can move myself into the De La Riva guard at my leisure. Well, I shouldn't say that, but you know, at a time of my choosing. And you're not powerless to prevent what I do, but you're certainly going to have to respect the guard itself. You can't just kick your leg out because of the shift in your center of gravity. You can't strike. So you're going to have to respond to what I'm doing by attempting to settle into that guard and neutralize it rather than just immediately bypass it when I throw like a lousy guard attempt. It's like you see guys do like a bad guard pull from standing and they pull bottom side control. I don't ever want to have that happen. I need to win the engagement phase by controlling usually your lead hand, but you know that can change depending on how the hand fighting goes. So you just need to recognize that that's the order of operations. I don't try to shoot myself into the guard. I also don't concede the engagement phase by going like this and hoping that you step into my De La Riva guard. You know,
that might happen in class when the guy doesn't know any better, is a white belt.
Well, and not only that,
trying to work his De La Riva to
well, and in class we tend to agree to grips, for lack of a better term. Like, oh, you know, Rob likes to play De La Riva. I'll step into his guard so we can have an exchange, a rally. You know, in competition, if you know I want to play this guard, you're not going to let me play this guard. So conceding the engagement phase by going to my back and hoping that my guard retention is good enough to deal with going directly to the retention phase.
Once you're out of the novice division, ain't gonna happen.
Yeah, or it would, and then it comes back around at the really high level where, you know, like if you're Keenan Cornelius, you can do this, and who the hell's gonna pass your guard? Sure. Because there's a combination of incredible skill with incredible flexibility. So somebody like that, or you know, the Meow brothers, they can start like that. For those of us who aren't blessed with ridiculous hip flexibility, or you know, the amount of time in their life to devote to becoming, you know, the top 0.1% of jiu-jitsu practitioners, the guard on our terms. Okay, so our next concept is that there are 3 phases of guard. Assuming you didn't just wake up one morning with somebody in your closed guard, particularly if we're talking about like a competition situation where I've decided to pull guard. I've sat down and we've broken the distance and there are no grips. So the first phase of guard is the engagement phase, which is what we're in now. We're both fighting for dominant grips. If I, let's say, get 2-on-1 grip, which again, we'll be going over this stuff later, I've now won the engagement phase. I can pull the guard of my choosing. If I want to move myself to the De La Riva guard, I can. If I want to go to butterfly, whatever guard I want to play, I can start to play that guard, which would move us. So let's say I got to this side, I pull, I got my De La Riva guard. We're now in the maintenance phase. I'm able to affect you with my guard. I can attempt to imbalance you, try to sweep you, try to submit you, what have you. If you were to win the engagement phase, there we go, we are now in the retention phase for me. I don't have any meaningful grips on you. If I were to get like here, then again, maintenance phase. But as you start to now redirect, now we're in the retention phase. So I've got to be inverting, setting my feet on you, whatever guard, which like there are several guard retention movements you can employ. There might even be a really fantastic product out there called the BJJ formula.
Which covered, if I recall correctly, the various retention movements.
Various movements, yeah. I've heard people say that one segment of the entire instructional is worth the entire cost of the instructional itself. Anyway, let's.
Fake news.
Yeah, exactly. So let's just recognize that if you don't know that there are 3 phases of guard, and that you don't know what they are, you may be acting according to one phase of guard while you're in another phase of guard. So I've seen people have trouble.
Maybe like trying to shoot a triangle from here.
Yeah, exactly. Like
we haven't even engaged yet.
Exactly. I'm just like, all right, let me try to triangle you. Like that's not going to work. For one, if we go back to our previous segment, I haven't affected your alignment. I haven't taken away your base, your posture, your structure. And 2, I haven't won the engagement phase. I haven't put you into the maintenance phase of my guard where I can affect your alignment with my hooks or my frames or my clamps or whatever. So understanding that I need to progress from engagement to maintenance and then use the maintenance phase to maintain and then attack. Or if I lose the engagement phase, we transition into the recovery or the retention phase where I have to know that it's not time for me to attack, it's time for me to perform a guard retention, get you back into the maintenance phase, and then I can get to work.
And we're going to cover all 3 phases
Absolutely.
in this upcoming instructional.
Yes. All right, we need to talk about some Japanese terminology here. The word we're looking for is kuzushi. Kuzushi is imbalance. So if I'm playing my De La Riva guard and I attempt to just sweep you, it's unlikely that you're going to move unless you've got terrible balance or I'm just a lot stronger than you. There's very little incentive for you to fling yourself about. Kuzushi is, in judo terminology, you would never attempt to throw somebody. Like, I would not be trying to like hip toss you right now because you're not vulnerable for it. I need to create a kuzushi. So a kuzushi is an act of imbalancing. We use the term just because it's a little bit easier than referring to momentum and center of gravity, which is the concept that we're actually covering here, which is anytime I want to sweep you, I need to take control of your momentum and your center of gravity from you. Or if you're a little bit more of a beginner, you're going to willingly give it to me. Most beginners tend to just charge forward and give you their center of gravity. So the movements that we'll be discussing in the future volumes refer to using my hamstring in the back of my thigh to push you away, using this butterfly hook to move you, and depending on where we end up in that sequence, I may add a tripod sweep to that. I may add my hand, we may add the DMX position, but basically I need to access this lever to move your center of gravity outside of your base.
Let's just show that outside, please, Rob.
Sure.
So you're controlling my heel.
So I'm controlling your heel so you can't retreat, right? So I'm controlling like the end of the lever here, and then I'm applying force roughly around the knee joint with my hamstring. You'll notice the effect of that. You have to kind of go backwards and down. You can't just go straight backwards, right? Because you'll just tip over, right? Like it starts to affect your knee as well. So you're gonna go kind of backwards and down, which starts to set me up for this, which, you're gonna know that as a more skilled practitioner that going into a squat back that way isn't super productive for you. So you're gonna usually drive back in, and that little bit of momentum that you give me by driving back in, that's when I'm snatching your momentum and center of gravity from you, using it to redirect it, and then I can start to force you to adjust your base, which should be predictable to me, and I can start snatching up levers, manipulating those levers to your hip, using that to complete the sweep. So
it's an action-reaction.
Action-reaction, or an action where like if you choose to ignore it and don't react, I'll also have something that I use. But like I said, that's more against beginners. More advanced practitioners will give you the reaction and we'll be able to play off it. So every attack we do is based around that idea. I will never just try to launch an attack at you. Again, for the reasons we listed earlier, things like base posture structure, things like not winning an engagement phase, not being in the right phase, not winning a range battle, all those things contribute to it. But also, if you have control of your momentum and your center of gravity, I'm not going to be effective at moving you around, and I should never try to attack you without creating that kuzushi. And it's not just for sweeps. That's something I should really clarify. I can use kuzushi to attempt to sweep you, yes. However, I can use a kuzushi, and your response to my kuzushi when I attempt to sweep you is going to be to post your hand or bring your weight forward so your neck is exposed. So even when we are attacking submissions, we have to utilize a kuzushi, particularly because in the NoGi DLR guard scenario, I don't have the luxury of those sleeve and collar grips where I can manipulate your posture. So it's this is kind of akin to what we talked about in the modern leg lock formula, where we mentioned that it's very difficult in a leg locking scenario to affect someone's posture. We can affect their base and we can affect their structure because we've got the levers to their hip in a leg locking situation. This is very similar in the NoGi DLR guard. The odds of me being able to get to your neck and in the initial phase, like we'll go over some specific scenarios where we do guillotines and different attacks when people post, but in the initial phases, of me playing the NoGi DLR guard, I can't touch your head. And I can't meaningfully pull your arms down. So I will not be able to shift your shoulders forward. So the kuzushi is always going to come from moving your legs about and getting underneath your hips and drifting you to some side, which will, again, either create a sweep potential, create a back attack potential if I create a dominant enough angle, or it'll create a submission potential because you will overreact to the initial sweep attempt. So without that initial kuzushi, none of that is possible. Okay, so we need to talk a little bit now about recovering our alignment. We talked about alignment earlier, and some of these concepts are they're designed to overlap. So forgive me if it seems a little bit repetitive and you got it on the first one. But the idea is, if I'm playing my NoGi DLR guard, the two main elements of my alignment that are vulnerable in this guard are my posture and my structure. My base isn't super vulnerable because my base is my back being on the ground. There's not a whole lot that you can do about that. But if I leave my leg dangling, I can be leg dragged relatively easily, and if I come forward too much, I can have my posture broken. All right, so The simple solution for that is just to manage those things in a way where you don't get to attack them. We're going to talk about leg positioning in different videos, mainly foot on the ground, foot behind the knee. I'm certainly not going to want my foot dangling out here, and I'm going to want to actually be relatively relaxed here. I don't need to be sitting up like this. I don't need this really deep crunch. Right? So that'll take care of a lot of the problems. But as pertains to this particular video, I want to make sure that if I do, let's say, for a minute, I make a mistake and you grab my leg, I'm immediately addressing that. Like my alignment is broken, in this case because of something I did willingly, but let's say, for instance, I put my foot behind your knee and you push it down and I'm just like fighting against you, you're going to leg drag me with a quickness. So my alignment is temporarily broken, I need to immediately fix that. If you start reaching for my neck, I need to intercept that hand. If you get my neck, I need to be pushing you while at the same time stripping that grip. Anything that affects your posture or your structure in this position, just like any other position, is going to compromise your ability to generate force. It's going to compromise your ability to execute any movement. Do not try to proceed when your alignment is broken. Immediately fix it before you get to the next stage, before you think about attacking, sweeping, submitting, anything like that. All right, we need to talk a little bit now about creating a dilemma, but also about not insisting on one particular avenue of attack. So the sort of trifecta we're trying to throw at our opponent here is the idea of sweep, submit, or back take. And how that's going to come into play is when I play especially when we're talking about like the De La Riva, like it's a little bit different with the reverse De La Riva, but let's just keep things simple. Now, from the De La Riva guard, I want to move you around, so we talked about like Kazushi, stuff like that. If I create enough of a dominant angle where this knee starts to turn in, the avenue to your back starts to become exposed. So anytime either you choose to respond this way, which wouldn't be a good idea, or I force you to respond by turning that way, my primary method of attack is the back. Anytime you stay relatively square to me and I manage to take both levers or create any kind of this sort of motion, and you start, tipping, falling down, whatever, then the sweep is the primary method of attack. And then if you either, let's say, base down to one knee and start, there you go. Now the submission starts to become the primary avenue of attack. So if you don't understand that there are, kind of specific circumstances under which each of these avenues of attack become viable, then you're going to be doing a lot of unnecessary work, extra work. You're going to be trying to submit someone when you should be sweeping them, you're going to be trying to sweep someone when you should be taking their back, etc., etc.
So the very general rule of thumb, if I start turning away, take my back.
Yep.
If I stay squared up, sweep me. If I start posting.
If you stay postured and I manage to kind of float you, I'm sweeping you.
Right.
If you start basing down and posting, then the submissions are going to start to come into play. Although there will be some back attacks. Like there's a little bit of overlap. Like this isn't a hard rule where if you do A, I must do B. But generally speaking, that's what I want to do. And also, I do want to construct my game around the idea that because these are the three options.
Take the back, sweep, submit, sweep, submit, back, take back.
We're gonna interchange between those because it's very difficult for someone to like constantly defend all three. It's easy to defend one thing. If I know you are only trying to sweep me, my life is way easier. If I know you are only trying to take my back, my life is way easier. So becoming kind of variable and fluid in your movement, your thinking, and how you apply your techniques is just an overall goal in jiu-jitsu. Obviously, we're trying to kind of move around and redirect force in jiu-jitsu. That's like our primary method of getting things done. But if you, again, like you insist on one thing, it's not really going to work. So that primary method throughout all of jiu-jitsu is especially applicable here in De La Riva guard because of the sort of reduced amount of control we have, right? Like, in the gi, we've got all those grips. In no-gi, we have fewer grips, so we have to be very subtle about how we're going to try to put our partner away or our opponent away because of that fact. And creating this dilemma, knowing that it exists, playing off of it is how we're going to increase our rate of success. All right, well, that's how you don't want to deal with a runner. When we play our NoGi DLR guard, there are going to be people who just decide to turn and flee. That's a given. There are a couple things that we need to understand about that. The better our initial kind of control scheme, and this is, by the way, one of the reasons we're going to move into the Mantis guard later on. You can't really run from that guard. Right? But when we're talking about dealing with a runner, when somebody turns to flee, if I'm just holding on, I'm wasting a ton of energy. I can't really do anything to you from here. Even if I manage to retain this for a few steps, eventually you'll break free. This is, again, very akin to what you see in leg locking, where people are like holding onto one leg, the other guy's sprinter escaping halfway down the mat, eventually gets their leg free. All you've done is get tired and burn your grips out. So what we want to recognize is that as somebody turns to run, I either need to bind both feet, which again, we'll kind of go over that in subsequent videos, or if you're turning to run, and I know that, like keeps like sort of moving away a little bit more, I need to come up and try to get body locks, singles, doubles, whatever. We don't deal with a runner by staying on our back and keeping a crappy single ankle grip like a bad De La Riva. We deal with a runner by chasing them with a body lock, chasing them with a single, or binding both of their legs. If you don't understand that, you're just going to waste a tremendous amount of time against certain types of opponents who just want to disengage, flee, and then pass on their own terms, or just stall. Frankly, you know, if somebody's up on points on you and they just don't want to engage, they want to pull a Brendan Schaub and shut your game down, bro, then they're, you know, it's their prerogative, right? Like under the rule set, if you exploit that, good for you. It's our job to not be the guy who's just trying to...
We lost because somebody else exploited the rule set better than we did.
Exactly. So we want to make sure that we understand. Bind the legs together, come up on the body lock or the double or the single, which does mean that some of you De La Riva players out there are going to have to learn a little bit of wrestling. Oh. Yeah, hate to say it. Without this option, there's definitely going to be an entire category of opponent that you just won't have anything for. There will be that guy who's super explosive, you know, a little bit greasy, not willing to engage, and they will run from you. So you can't just hold on to one leg and get pulled across the room. You have to switch to these other attacks, or there's just going to be a huge gap in your game. All right, now that we've covered some concepts that are specific to the NoGi open guard, De La Riva guard, what we're going to be covering in this instructional, I want to give you a methodology or a kind of a drilling set that we use at our academy to drastically accelerate your skill development. Obviously in this set we're going to be covering NoGi De La Riva, the DMX, the Mantis guard, and the reverse De La Riva. So the footage that we're going to show you to come is going to be me at my academy training these specific guards. However, you can use this idea to develop any part of your jiu-jitsu game. And before we get into the actual, it's called Fuck Your Jiu-Jitsu. Before we get into the actual Fuck Your Jiu-Jitsu drills, obviously you want to learn the techniques, right? Like we're going to be presenting you with all these different sweeps, guard retention movements, some submissions. So you can't do these drills without knowing the movements first. However, once you have a basic grasp of some of these movements, what actually allows anyone to be effective at jiu-jitsu or like anything in fighting is live application against a resisting opponent. So with Fuck Your Jiu-Jitsu, what we're doing is taking an isolated skill and we're putting a restriction on one person. If we're doing guard retention, I'm on my back, I'm only allowed to perform guard retention movements, whereas you can do whatever passing you want. So the top person is developing their passing in any realm. Like you might start to do whatever, let's say knee cut or over-unders pass. So go ahead. I'm hipping out, framing. So I'm using a frame and a hip escape. That's a basic guard retention movement, right? All I'm allowed to do during the Fuck Your Jiu-Jitsu guard retention is
Retain guard.
I can't grab you. I can't close my guard. I can't go to half guard. I can't do anything. So every skill set that we do, we can set a restricted parameter on one person. As this is going to apply to Fuck Your Jiu-Jitsu for our NoGi De La Riva stuff, is the top person. So this would be an example of Fuck Your Jiu-Jitsu sweeping. With Fuck Your Jiu-Jitsu sweeping, the sweeper, the guard player, is unrestricted. I can go through any series of attacks that I want. The top person has to engage my guard, so you can't just disengage and flee, but you're also not allowed to pass. So for example, if you're standing and, like in the development phase, if I get a little bit lazy and I leave this leg out, you would normally leg drag me, and every time that happens, oh man, this stuff doesn't work. This Fuck Your Jiu-Jitsu allows me to, without any fear of you passing or of you countering what I'm doing, you're just going to stay in good base, good alignment, good posture, good structure, all that kind of stuff. So you're not falling down, you're not taking a dive, you're not letting me do anything. I have to correctly perform the Kuzushi movements. I have to imbalance you or unbalance you. So I've got to do everything correctly within the context of just developing the movements without having to worry that I'm going to lose a roll. Like, let's face it, what impairs most people's development is the fear of losing during a roll, the fear of being submitted, the fear, oh man, I'm not good enough. The fuck your jiu-jitsu drills, just take that and throw it out the window. One person is restricted, so there's no reason they need to worry about losing, because of course you're going to lose. You've got a bunch of restrictions placed against you. So your restrictions are that you can't even try to pass my guard.
Are you allowed to do like a bad leg drag?
Well, so here's where you can you can monitor, or you can assert your level of difficulty as the top person and as the bottom person against a more beginner practitioner. For example, when I do fuck you jiu-jitsu and I'm the person on top, I let them get every grip they want, and I don't try to do any passing movements whatsoever. As I go up against blue belts, I don't let them maybe get every single grip. As I go up against purple belts, I make sure that I don't let them get, maybe wrist or sleeve. So you can set your level of difficulty, and this again, it allows a variety of different skill levels to get good training with a variety of different training partners. You don't have to be black belt and black belt, white belt and white belt. A black belt can train with a white belt and still get a ton out of this. You just allow them to do more and you do less. Right? So what we're going to show you is some examples of that. I'll be going through Mantis Guard, I'll be going through De La Riva Guard, I'll be going through DMX, I'll be going through Reverse De La Riva, and then once we've gotten some rounds of this like fuck you jiu-jitsu style of drilling, then you can start progressing to rounds where you're only using these guards against a lower level. So we're going to give you an example of me with a blue belt, and you give an example of me with a purple belt, and it's a roll. They can do whatever they want, but now the restriction is on me. So before with like the pure fuck you jiu-jitsu rounds, the restriction is on the top person so that I can develop my guard play, my sweeps, all that stuff. Then as I start to get more and more proficient, now the restriction is on me. I can only use NoGi DLR techniques. So you'll see in those rounds against a blue belt, I can run a bit of a clinic. I can do all of the sweeps. I can do all the submissions. I can do all kinds of stuff. Against a purple belt, not as much, right? So the higher the level of skill of your opponent, the less you should be able to execute against them. And so the ultimate expression is obviously to be able to perform these techniques in a live roll against somebody of your level. Above would be great, but let's be realistic. So that's kind of our track as to how we develop this. We're going to do basic, let's call it dummy drilling. You learn the technique, and then you go live within those restricted fuck you jiu-jitsu type drills. Again, taking the win or loss out of it. And I can't oversell these enough. We have our visiting student program at my academy that we've talked about before. Almost universally, the visitors that come, by the time they leave, whether they're there for a few days, a week, or a month, what they have found has accelerated their game the most, helped their development the most, is internalizing how to perform the fuck your jiu-jitsu drills. Whether they're able to take them back to their own academy or whether they just practice them when they're with us, that has been the single thing that I don't know if it's completely unique. I don't know if anybody else uses this exact same methodology, but
nobody uses that terminology.
So there you go, yeah. So it's a fairly proprietary system that we use to drastically accelerate the rate of skill development of our students and of our visitors. So I highly recommend that you watch some of these upcoming videos that include just me training at my academy, how I've developed this guard or these guards, and use it to first develop this and then see how it works in the rest of your game, and let me know what the results you get. And of course, if you want to ever visit, islandtopteam.com is my website. Send me an email. We'd love to have you visit and show you this stuff in detail. Hey everybody, in this section we're going to be going over NoGi DLR guard maintenance and retention. We're going to start out with just introducing you to the basic mechanics of the De La Riva guard, how you're going to use them to create that kuzushi where we're going to imbalance, or if you want to be technically correct, which is the best kind of correct, unbalance your opponent. I don't know that it's going to be possible for me to not say imbalance a few times over the course of shooting this instructional, so fuck all of y'all. I'm a huge Star Wars fan and I'm still in mourning over The Last Jedi burying the franchise. So I'm occasionally going to say imbalance instead of unbalance. So once we've covered that kuzushi imbalance, unbalance thing, we're going to go over some retention stuff, how to deal with some typical passes. And we're also going to go over a basic sweep sequence that you can introduce, although the majority of our sweep attacks and submission backkick attacks will come in the attack section that will follow. But that's going to be what you're in for, and it's going to start right now. Hey everybody, we're going to start going over the actual mechanics of the De La Riva guard, the position, what your legs, arms are supposed to look like here. So first thing is like the De La Riva hook itself. Let's give some insight into that. I want my foot to be hooking along the inside of my partner's thigh, and it's going to end up sliding up and down as part of the operations. I want my shin to be turning in because my goal is to try to get my partner's knee to go in that direction. That's going to be sort of like the essential battle in this position. If I can make your knee do this, I'm basically safe. You know, you're positioned to generate force in that direction. You're not positioned to generate force in this direction. We talked about alignment. Our relative alignments right now are that my leg press, my powerful mechanisms are oriented towards you. Your powerful mechanisms are oriented towards the door. That's what I want. Anytime you start to open your knee up and my knee starts to rotate in that direction, externally rotating my hip, it's going to weaken my De La Riva hook. The purpose of the De La Riva hook, or what the purpose of the De La Riva guard in general, is like with all guards, I want to manage the range. I want to make sure that you get as close to me as I want and no closer, or I want to make sure that I can push you away if I need to, and then after I achieve that goal, I can start to worry about unbalancing you, and then catching the levers, then potentially sweeping or submitting you.
So this hook to some extent stops me from just
fleeing,
backing out.
while my thigh and the hamstring create a frame stopping you for advancing. So we always need to have a mechanism for keeping you at bay, but we also want a mechanism for keeping you from running. And then the addition of this, the hook that's created here, combined with my rotation this way, like I create a counterpoint that allows me to start buckling your knee. If I were to just go like this without that hook, I wouldn't be able to have any chance at turning your knee that way. So those are the functions that the hook creates, which is why it's so important that we not abuse flexibility to play the De La Riva guard, that we keep ourselves in this alignment, and ideally we're adjusting slightly to face our opponent at, like a 45-degree angle here. As far as what I'm doing with my other foot, again, in the gi, we have the luxury of camping out here, because if you attempt to grab my foot, I can get that sleeve grip and attack all of those cool like sit-up type sweeps. In no-gi, I will only use this as a target of opportunity. I won't camp out here. My other foot will be behind your knee, typically, and most of the time. This way I'm using my shin to extend your leg out. I'm using my butterfly hook to pull you in, and also to keep you from fleeing. Alternately, I will occasionally put my foot on the ground, which will enable me to push stronger. If I take this foot off the ground and I start trying to push you, it's very difficult. If I put that foot on the ground, I can push you much easier just because I'm deriving base from the ground. So that's what my legs are doing. Always trying to keep my knees relatively neutral, not letting them splay out in either direction. My grip is around the base of your ankle, around your heel really. Like ankle is almost a bit of a misnomer because that's fairly easy to strip. This you can pull back and I'll be attached to you. Additionally, by gripping the side of your ankle, if your weight comes onto the ball of your foot, I can start to access that lever, create rotation. So if you happen to be driving forward towards me, it's a little bit easier under some circumstances for me to rotate you. So let's just turn here to give a little bit of a different angle. So the basic mechanics of my De La Riva guard involve kind of fitting myself into this space. My butt cheek, bottom of my hamstring thigh should be fairly close. Being extended like this just starts to create a moment arm, a lever axis for you. So I want to keep my butt on like the side of your foot, almost resting my hip on your instep while I catch the ankle here. And then again, angling so that this hook naturally fits into the space on your thigh without externally rotating my hip, keeping this here. So this is mostly where we're going to be hanging out. This hand is a floater. If we were in a self-defense scenario, I might occasionally be using this to cover up if I were to be struck. Although, I'll be honest, it'll be very difficult for you to strike me in the face without coming forward. Yeah. And as soon as you do, I'm going to tip you. So this is one of those I'm sure when we put some videos from this project out on YouTube, there's going to be some clown shooting.
This would not work in the street.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So my head. If I was doing this, definitely it would not work in the street. If I'm here, first off, I can be parrying, defending, all that. Second off, we are just as close to me hitting you in vulnerable areas, and in some cases, much farther, because you can't kick me. I can kick you. All right. So I can be using this to grip at you. Particularly if we are wearing jackets, we can start to add back in all that great gi material. If we're not, then while you're trying to punch me, you're getting booted in the face, you're getting booted in the dick. So it's actually a much more sound guard for self-defense purposes than people might think. But that's the essential mechanic, is I'm trying to access both of these levers to your hip. Using that kuzushi motion, I'm making sure that I maintain my alignment, always maintaining my structure, maintaining my base, monitoring my posture constantly. So the other thing we need to address here is my head positioning. It's neither necessary nor even desirable for me to be crunching. I need to relax as much as possible. It's difficult enough on your core to be playing a lot of guard anyway, and it's not great for your back to be constantly curling up like this. So I can actually keep my head fairly far back here. You don't really want to rest it on the ground, but about here is good. I want to maintain pretty neutral posture, and I want to avoid rolling onto either side of my shoulder or my hip, unless I'm specifically attacking something. There's a whole series of attacks called the shotgun sweep that looks like this, or the shotgun series that looks like that, but that's a temporary position. I certainly wouldn't hang out here and play guard in this configuration. I'd be fairly vulnerable. So just know that your base is your back, flat on the ground. You're affecting your partner's base by controlling these levers, maintaining the alignment of your legs, keeping your hips from getting externally rotated, and constantly using this hand for multiple things, pulling the knee, blocking, checking, gripping if possible. And then when somebody bases down, if you manage to go to that knee, I'm going to be sitting up and try to attack various things with this arm. And so that's the only time I'm going to come up into the seated position with the De La Riva guard. The rest of the time, I'm flat on my back.
So 3 questions, Rob.
Sure.
Number 1, if you take the De La Riva, please.
Yeah.
A lot of people teach the De La Riva sitting on the foot. You're teaching it off, something like this, or the foot more lined up with the middle of your body.
Yeah.
You like to play it with the foot off the side, like you said, almost in your hip pocket.
Yes.
Why is that? Doesn't that require more flexibility?
Well, not if I create the proper angle. It would require more flexibility if I was trying to play it square with you. I definitely want to play it at, like I said, roughly a 45-degree angle if possible. If I play this on the foot, there's a limit to the amount of kazushi access that I'm going to have. If I try to do get into the basic, if I start leg pressing you here, right,
pushing with your buttock as opposed to your hamstring.
Yeah, in the gi, it's fine to do this. I try to make all of my material kind of transferable gi to no-gi, so I still play the De La Riva guard in the gi with my foot to the side, but I recognize the validity of this. I think it's great. In no-gi, I want to be able to push you powerfully here and set you up for the rest of the movements with my kazushi. If I put myself here, that kazushi starts to go away in a hurry.
Okay.
So that's the main reason I wouldn't be relying on that as much.
Which takes me to the second question.
Yeah.
You see in gi a lot, people going really, really deep with this hook, which
Yes.
might have to do with the hip being over top of the foot as well, unless you're crazy flexible.
Yeah.
Do you like going super deep with that?
Yes, in some of the material down the road, we're gonna, particularly the shotgun series, we're gonna be going deep. We're also going to be playing a deep De La Riva hook, or really a De La Riva X. Like so if you drop the one knee, I will absolutely play this in no-gi, and there's going to be a whole way of attacking from here that doesn't involve, the luxury of those sleeve grips that you see in the gi. So absolutely, yes, we will use that deep hook. It's a little bit more situational. Like I said, it's a target of opportunity with the shotgun series, or it's a target of opportunity when someone bases down. We won't generally, if we're just playing the De La Riva guard from here, we won't generally do this, because this is like knee bar, back step kind of territory, and 411, all that. Yeah, exactly. So, obviously we're going to cover how to leg lock proof your NoGi De La Riva guard. That's going to be our final section in this series. But yeah, that's why we want to be very cautious about how we employ that deep De La Riva hook. It's more of a target of opportunity.
Okay. Final question. Mm-hmm. The De La Riva is mostly for standing, kneeling on one knee, down on both knees. Mostly
for standing. It's not an attack, or it's not a guard that we will play. Like if you're on both knees, obviously I physically can't make it happen.
I was a straw man.
Yeah, of course. One knee, it is quite possible, although hanging out here, because your base is farther behind and lower, I'm not going to have the same access to attacks. So that's when we will move into that deep De La Riva. Like anytime somebody bases down, this is pretty much what I do, unless, and we will have an entire section on the Kyotera ankle lock, right? Sure. If I can get to that, then absolutely. And certainly when we move into our reverse De La Riva section, then all of these kinds of attacks start to become possible.
Sure.
So there's definitely a cohort of movements that are going to be covering somebody basing down on one knee. The majority of our attacks are based around the idea of somebody approaching you standing.
Which is the most common in no-gi guard passing anyway.
Yeah, I mean, again, kind of depending on who you are, but I mean, I think in general over the last probably 10 years in jiu-jitsu, period, there's been a movement to passing standing, and you tend to generally, you approach most people with a standing passing scenario, and then there are specific guards that people will try to shut down by coming down to their knees. There's a logic for some people when you're facing a leg locker that you come down to the knees, although I don't think it's particularly valid logic, but whatever. So yeah, there's a pretty decent chance that someone's going to come in and try to pass standing. De La Riva is going to be how you deal with it. Certainly, if it's the only guard you play, you're going to be very easily shut down by a kneeling passer. So it's incumbent on you to learn a half guard, a butterfly guard, or something like that to round out your game, and use this mostly for standing opponents. So there you saw a brief demonstration of how I would enter the NoGi De La Riva guard from a seated position. We start as always with that engagement phase and that hand fight. Generally speaking, we're going to be facing either a palm, hopefully we're not going to start our NoGi grappling match really clenched fist on your part. You can tell Stefan's filmed with me before, he's getting pretty fucking sick of me. So depending on whether or not somebody's got their kind of palm forward or palms out, yeah, exactly, that's going to dictate how I'm going to be able to win my grip. If I attempt to go, if Stefan's got his palms facing this way, if I attempt to go over top of that, I'm passing the line of his grip. So it's unlikely that I will go like this, because then we're just doing a bro handshake that I'm going to lose because he's got superior base and angle at this point. So I'm not going to try to go over. What I'm going to be doing is basically feinting with this hand and coming up underneath. Similarly, if you were facing this way, I'm not going to try to go under. I'm going to be feinting with one hand and going over top. So the angle of your palm determines whether I go here or here. So I don't want to cross your palm. I don't want to shake hands with you. I want to come up against the back of your hand if possible. If you happen to get a grip on me, I want to immediately break the grip. So the grip break involves gripping your wrist cross, so your left to my left, and I'm going to be folding my elbow with my wrist, trying to go through the space, the gap between your thumb and your fingers.
Aikido works.
Aikido works. Everything works, really. And it's like that. Although I got these wrist breaks from wrestling, so who knows. So if I were to get, again, grip this way, same sort of thing, I just fold my elbow, and now I can bring my hand to the elbow point. I'm not going to teach the 2-on-1, because there's a ton of detail here, right? Shameless plug, bjjconcepts.net.
Yeah, we've got an entire
module on this 2-on-1 grip. But for now, let's just say I got this grip, I'm going to reinforce it. So
big sandwich
the
grip.
Big sandwich grip, yes. All right, so when you're hungry, nothing but a big sandwich will do. So once I get this grip, I'm going to be leaning a little bit. I don't want to get the grip when you have the luxury of moving around. Or sorry, I don't want to get the grip and launch my De La Riva guard when you have the luxury of moving around. So if you go to pull your leg back, and I'm trying to, I might shoot myself into a pass. But when I actually win the grip, I'm going to hang back a little bit.
It totally plants the weight on my foot.
Exactly. So I've created, this would basically be a kazushi. I'm taking your center of gravity. I use that tension now. I'm going to bring one foot slightly forward, and I'm going to pull myself in, biting my heel against the ground, and my De La Riva hook is going to shoot as I change the angle slightly. So I was relatively square with you. I moved to that 45-degree angle. I'm going to keep this grip while I insert my butterfly hook. Again, my knees are not splaying out, and if I have a good grip here and I'm able to shift your weight, I'm immediately moving into my imbalancing, and we'll go over this double ankle concept for sweeping later on. But we don't want to think of pulling guard. We want to think of pulling sweeps. And we'll go over this in the next video more when we talk about standing guard pulls. But the objective is, if I got myself to my NoGi De La Riva guard and then I just let go and start playing NoGi De La Riva guard, this is a huge luxury. Most of the time when I lose this grip, I'm not going to get it back. All right? I've only got one hand for gripping now. Once I've started to go to the ankle, you've got two hands for grip fighting. So you will instantly break this grip. So this hand is very rarely going to be able to maintain a grip. It'll be opportunistic, and when we get it, we'll launch some attacks. But if I manage to start out here and I've got you bent over I'm keeping this. I'm not going to the ankle grip necessarily. I'm maintaining this, and I'm using the De La Riva hook and the butterfly hook combined with this pull to load your center of gravity up, and then I would immediately start launching my attacks.
I'm not running that way. I'm balanced over top of you, hoping you're not going to sweep.
I've taken your balance, I've taken your center of gravity, I've got control of both levers to your hip and one lever to your shoulder. This is about as good as it gets. So I'm going to launch either a sweep, or your response to my sweep will give me, a guillotine or an omoplata or something like that. So that's how we want to enter our NoGi De La Riva guard against a standing opponent when I'm beginning with my seated, which, as we've talked about, this is a requirement. Even if you're really fond of the De La Riva guard, you shouldn't start here unless you're Keenan Cornelius Palomar, unless you basically have an unpassable guard. You need to start here, win the engagement phase, move to your angle, set up your hooks, your frames, whatever, and then start to rock your partner's base and get to work. All right, we need to cover how we're going to get to our De La Riva guard from a standing position. We got to make a distinction between the way Stefan's standing now, which is basically in a wrestling stance. So I would be matching him with my right foot forward, his right foot forward. I need to get a grip. Again, we talked about a little bit of grip fighting in the earlier section. I'm either going to the outside of the palm to grip, right? If the hand's turned up, I'm not going to go over top, right? I need to try to catch an angle, get to there, catch an angle, get to there. Or I can sacrifice my hand and do a grip break right away and move that way. Both are valid, just kind of depends on the scenario. So if we're both in a wrestling stance and I know I want to get to my De La Riva guard, let's say I've won this grip, I'm going to make you step forward, putting that weight heavy. My foot's going to come in, and it's basically the same as what we did from a seated guard position. What we need to cover though is somebody who comes out, in this kind of like negating stance where all they're looking to do is touch and exactly. Right? In a scenario like this, I don't have time to pull De La Riva guard because I know that as soon as we make contact, you're going to sit. So if I'm trying to get to the De La Riva guard under those circumstances, what I want to do is rush out and sit to my butt this way. That way, if you start to sit down now, I'm going to come up. And I know this is cheesy, like tournament strategy stuff, but hopefully I've sat, and if you sit a moment after me, I've swept you, and I get these free 2 points. I know it's kind of lame. If, however, we end up in that kind of both we've sat down, I can still attempt to establish my NoGi De La Riva guard and start attacking like the inversion style, Barambola type stuff. I'll be honest, that's not a huge part of my game.
Sure.
Like playing, like if somebody wants to sit on their butt, I'll try to pass their guard.
Sure.
I might try to entangle their legs.
And leg lock them.
And leg lock them. Certainly we will go over like the NoGi Barambola motion, which is all you would really be doing from here. And the Kyotera style ankle lock is a viable option from here. But we're not really going to get into double guard pull, both seated guard, like strategy, like
stand up or leg lock them.
Basically, yeah. If somebody chooses to stay standing, we're going to go to our NoGi De La Riva guard. If somebody wants to play guard, we're going to oblige them and either leg lock them or try to pass.
Can you just show the standing guard pull one more time?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're here, same on lead hands out.
I one, I pull, I scoot, I get my grip. You can see how
I'm so much more off balance already.
Exactly.
Like
I'm tipping you. So there's this, a series of attacks. If you were to fall to your hip, I'd be moving into all those kinds of like Barambola type motions. If you manage to recover your balance, your arm is wide open, so there's going to be like omoplata type stuff. There's definitely more weight in motion when I pull from standing than when I pull from seated. So the unbalancing that I'm going to achieve is going to be greater when I pull this guard from standing. Very much like in the gi, like if you can. Overall notion or strategy of we're not trying to pull guard, we're trying to pull sweeps, we're trying to pull attacks. We're not camping out in a guard from a pulled position. We want to immediately kuzushi and get to work. All right, as you may recall, we do not attack our opponent until we've created a kuzushi, until we've created some kind of alignment break. So here's our basic kuzushi for our NoGi De La Riva guard. Again, if I've pulled to the De La Riva guard, as we mentioned earlier, the kuzushi is already achieved.
Sure.
Right? My lever control to your shoulder allows me to shift your center of gravity, which allows me to load you up.
At this point, I'm Imbalance.
You're imbalance. Yes, exactly.
Or unbalanced.
Yeah, there's an imbalance between us in the force. So if I get to my NoGi DLR guard and I've lost that initial wrist grip, and now you're camped out, you've got your proper alignment, you're in your stance, you're in your base, I've got my alignment, I'm trying to affect yours. The thing to be aware of is that once somebody is relatively square to you, they're going to be able to start popping this hook off. So I don't necessarily want to try to insist on this. If you're strong enough to get here, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. If I had a problem with this, I wouldn't be playing this card. Right? So when this hook gets shed, or when I just get here and I decide I'm going to get to work before you force that like hook shedding sort of motion, because frankly it's not pleasant. When you start turning this, it goes against my shin, it's not nice. I'm going to be a little bit of a, I'm going to be a little bit of a soy boy here. I'm going to be sensitive. I don't want you to trigger me by taking out my DLR hook.
This is a safe space.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to make sure that I just take the hook out myself, because you on center isn't viable with this DLR guard. You pushed backwards and now moving back into me is where I can take your base and your balance away from you.
So it's the pushing with this thigh
Exactly.
while holding my
While
heel.
holding your heel, I'm also trying to like curl backwards and turn. Like obviously right now I can't, but if your heel becomes light, I'm trying to do that. At the same time, with this leg, I'm pulling forward. My butterfly hook is contracting. So my left and right corners, my right hip, my left shoulder are pulling towards while I do this. So you can see how that magnifies.
Absolutely. Because I can't base
Exactly. If all I were to do is do this, you can stay fairly stable. As I pull and push, it messes with you a lot more. So I'm performing those actions simultaneously. When we drill this, in class, we try to get kind of to the top of the shin and push here. If you have your opponent's safety less as a priority, you're certainly welcome to start pushing on the kneecap. And if you need to add to the pressure, we can push on the kneecap with our hand. Just the same as when we get our partner moving backwards and they start to move back forwards, we can assist that with his hand. So this floater can be like punching against the kneecap or pulling against the back of the knee. If you were to stay backwards, we'd go into the tripod sweep. We're going to go over that in the next video, but this is the essence of our basic kazushi. Is we're choosing to abandon the DLR hook, or the DLR hook has been shed. We are extending while we pull, and then if you stay there, like I said, we'll go over that. If you drive back in, I'm resetting my DLR hook, but now, let's just turn, and there we go. Now, I'm not trying to keep it here. I'm pulling you to me, and it's elevating into this like knife edge, which again, we're gonna kind of go over that in another video.
Side kick to the taint.
Side kick to the taint, exactly. And I'm using that to pull you in and float you. There's my subsequent kazushi, and we can exploit that in a few different ways. So without this, your NoGi DLR guard is gonna be essentially non-functional. You're going to have people shedding the hooks, moving into knee cuts, rolling kimuras, all kinds of stuff. You will be reliant on a pretty unskilled opponent to just kind of bumble or stumble forward. This allows you to create a shift in their center of gravity, allows you to access a lever, which will draw a response that will then allow you to start mobilizing your NoGi DLR guard. All right, so our first kind of follow-up to our initial kazushi movement is going to be the tripod sweep. So if I've managed to start to push Stefan back and his hips go backwards and he stays there, he kind of puts his hips back over space, and I'm able to insert my heel into the crease of his hip, right? I believe it's called the iliac crest, the edge of my foot. So it's important that I'm not doing this sort of thing. I'm just placing the edge of my foot in this strong leg press alignment. When I go to hit the tripod sweep, the important distinction here is that I'm not trying to push Steph, so stay on balance here. I'm not trying to push him back. Depending on his height relative to mine, I simply may not be able to push him back far enough to tip him over. What I want to do is when I get this and I put my foot here, I'm trying to kind of pump him up and take his heel off the ground. Now, it doesn't really matter how tall you are. If you're 8 feet tall, you might be able to put your foot back down. But once I pump your weight up slightly and take your heel off the ground, now we've got a single leg balance situation. I've got the lever to your hip, and I still have that butterfly hook pulling you to prevent you from hopping backwards. So We're here. Either you've turned and shed the hook, or I've chosen to extract it for my own purposes. I push, and then I rest my heel in. Now I pump, and I pull. This continues to pull, this pushes down. I immediately capture your ankle here. My left butterfly hook keeps you elevated. I don't want you to put this foot back down because now you're regaining your base. Now we can actually have this kind of battle where if you grab my ankle here, we're in an equation. You've got base, I've got base, I've got a lever to your hip, you've got a lever, like this is just gonna be a battle that I don't want to get into. But if I manage to keep this in the air and I capture this and you can't put it down, if you were to grab my foot, now it doesn't matter so much because you're not as powerful and I can strip that, perform my technical stand-up, and initiate my passing. So from this side, I've initiated the Kazushi, I place, I pull, I put my partner down on the ground, I put his butt on the ground. I immediately want to try to hide this heel, but like I mentioned earlier, if I'm controlling this and he can't put his foot down, even if he grabs my heel, it's not a huge deal, he's got no power, I can simply swim it out. So if he grabs underneath, I'll go up and back in. If you were to grab over top, I can just go straight back. Right? Most of the time people are going to be going either that kind of grip. If it's a sole grip, again, just pedaling basically. You're not strong here. There are any number of ways we can do it. I put my toes on the mat, ball of the foot on the mat, and I withdraw into base. And I can bring this foot in. I tuck your heels into your butt and begin to initiate my passing. The consequence of you experiencing that sweep, or even an attempt at that sweep, is going to draw you to push back in. So let's just make sure that we kind of cover this, because if I do this and you hang out here and I start to threaten this sweep, your first thing is going to be right to draw back in. You may even strip my foot. And now we're right back into our initial purpose, which was to use the Kazushi to get my De La Riva foot sliding up underneath your junk, moving your base around, moving your center of gravity around. So even if the tripod sweep itself fails, it doesn't matter. The only way it will fail is if you give me back that momentum, that center of gravity, and I can reinitiate that attack. Okay, now we're gonna go over how to use that Kazushi elevation to do the taint sweep on the left leg. So Stephanie, if you wanna...
I'll dress right.
Get yourself ready. So, as we've covered previously, I've extended my leg. Either I've attacked the tripod, my partner's pushed back in, or he pushed back in right away. I take that and I move my foot, and we'll give you another angle in a second. I move the edge of my foot underneath his crotch while I pull with my left butterfly hook. This allows me to start lifting. You notice you were forced to take this. Sorry, I'm done. There.
No, I like it.
So you were forced to take the step, which is predictable to me, and I can now capture it. I will use the pressure there to tip you over, and I'll start to extract my feet. You'll notice I'm still holding both of your ankles. I don't release because you might flee. If I just let go, you technical stand up, I did all that work for nothing. So when I land in position, my right foot, which was inside, my left foot, which was inside, they're both gonna come out into base. I'm still holding this ankle. I build my base up first. Then I can worry about releasing that ankle and moving into anything else. Additionally, one of the reasons we want to hold on or like maintain the grip on this ankle is there are people who will rotate to their other hip here to try to stand up. That's going to be one of the things that sets up our Kyotera ankle lock, which we'll go over in future videos. But I want to make sure that I'm keeping both of the levers to your hip until I have completed my technical stand-up, and then I can worry about what else I'm going to do. So let's give you a slightly different angle here.
Oh, good.
Alright. So, again, Kazushi, pressure backwards, float. Start with your leg kind of back. So, yeah, there we go, exactly. So as I push you, you come back in, you can see how easy it is for me to bring that
foot
foot.
to a pre-programmed place.
Exactly. There's nowhere else it really can go. If you were to try to accelerate and step really far that way, it's not like that would help you at all. And as long as my hand is kind of there, I'm good to go. So like there will be some other sweeps that you could do. Like if you're an X-guard guy, for example, there you go, you're set. You're gonna finish the sweep anyway. So part of what we'll be doing with this style of guard is just creating that initial Kazushi to give you the opportunity to not even have to finish with any of these sweeps, but to transition into another guard or sweep sequence of your own that you can plug right in. So that's one of the
So they are sweeps in their own right.
Yeah.
But they're setups and by the virtue of them also being kazushi, there's setups for everything else.
Yeah, and part of the way that I've tried to design this series is that even if you don't end up adopting the entire gamut of attacks and mantis to this to that, just this initial kazushi, if you happen to just find yourself in, I'm in NoGi and I'm in the De La Riva guard, maybe I play the De La Riva guard in the gi, but it's not one of my go-tos. I've got a basic kazushi that I can use.
Boom, 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 and now, thank
now
God,
X
I can
guard,
switch.
or now
to,
I got whatever. So this initial kazushi to like the taint sweep motion is really valuable for that reason. It incentivizes you to just have a more well-rounded game. Again, I know I kind of beat the point of well-rounded games to death, but if I can easily plug something in that doesn't require you to build a huge full NoGi DLR system and just give you a basic motion, and then you use that to transition back to your other guards, you're still a much more well-rounded grappler because you now have a new range of guard that you can play without the whole system. So that's kind of the idea here. Because it's so effective in the initial phases, you can maneuver into X guard or whatever other guard. Okay, now we're moving on to our section on defending the guard passes from the NoGi DLR guard. The primary guard passes you're going to face are going to be like overwhelmingly the leg drag and then the knee cut, and then there'll be a few other ones farther down that aren't as common, but also quite effective. So we're going to try to give you an early stage response, a mid stage response, and a late stage response wherever possible. Some of them it won't be, but certainly the first couple will give you early, mid to late stage. I can't stress this enough. Get good at the early stage one and just don't deal with the entire problem, because if we're constantly in the retention phase, we're not going to be nearly as effective with our De La Riva guard. That should be obvious, but some people tend to base their games around this idea of, I'm going to have the worst case scenario happen and be able to be effective from there. You can't be as effective in the worst case scenario as you can in the best case scenario. That again should be just obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people think that jiu-jitsu is magic. And if you just get like, really, I'll let you on my back and then I'll submit you from there if I really practice, like you can invest 1/10 the amount of time in dealing with the early stage and prevention that you have to invest in being really good from the worst possible positions. Just from like an 80-20 time investment principle, spend most of your time on just getting really sharp with the early stage prevention and then graduate to the later ones. And like you almost never see Rafa Mendes, all of them, but don't use that as an excuse to skip to the end. Get good at the first one, and your NoGi DLR guard will be much more effective. Hey everybody, let's deal with the leg drag first. So a couple of considerations here. First off, if I just, as we mentioned, if I leave my leg dangling, I'm constantly going to be dealing with, well, toe holds from like ambitious people, but realistically, the leg drag is the primary thing I need to deal with. That's what it's going to look like. If I allow my partner's hand to check my knee, the early stage response is going to be eliminated. I shouldn't say eliminated, but largely eliminated for my options. So we want to make sure that our hand is here. Like if somebody does get a grip on my foot, it'll either be because I was camping and they just grabbed my ankle and removed it, or maybe I was here and they managed to push my shin down and step back exactly. So those are the two ways that you'll end up here. You shouldn't end up here because you chose to put your foot here. That's just a huge error, just don't do it. So let's say we're here, Stefan checks, he steps back. Now if we hang out here, the leg drag is coming. So my initial response, as soon as Stefan starts to move with the leg drag, is I just kick out. I don't fight it. I don't give you tension, because now if I stay tense and you drag me, it's more powerful. So I want to relax my hip as much as possible. The tension in my leg is going to activate the lever. So as you start to push me, I relax my hip and I can kick out. All right, that's early stage, pretty simple. As far as what your grip is going to look like, over that bunion, I know people on Reddit love that I use the word bunion, but over there, and then turning and redirecting that way. We aid this with the palm checking the knee, and there we go. So I want to prevent that palm from checking my knee. I want to kick out and reset my hook, early stage. Mid stage is you do manage to get that knee check, or I just don't do the early stage response and my foot passes the line of your hip. You'll notice I'm already extending my leg. If you manage to rotate me and turn me this way, you're moving into the later stages of the leg drag. So I'm going to, again, go with it to a certain extent. So as you redirect, I'll be kind of chopping you, doing a leg press motion.
using my calf to block you. If it's within my range of motion to do so, I now bring my left shin inside. So I've managed the distance by extending, I've moved my shin back in. I'm now going to move temporarily to the butterfly guard and reset my De La Riva guard if I'm inclined to keep playing it. If I just decide that you're too damn good at the leg drag and I want to go from here, this is a pretty damn awesome guard as well. So
Sure.
you can move into your leg attacks, single leg X, whatever. But if you want to go back to here, now you do. If you are not flexible, and I mean, this does not require any flexibility if it's done properly. So I shouldn't even really say like if you're not flexible enough. If you screw it up, if I don't get enough of a leg press and Stefan manages to drive in a little bit more and I'm not able, yeah, exactly, I'm not able to do this, I'm gonna start moving myself into the mantis guard. So in particular, what you're looking to do is start driving this knee across, and once that knee meets the ground, now we're pretty much just defending the leg drag with frames. That's a whole different thing now. It's guard retention. Look up something else for that. This is going to be a 12-hour, 14-hour instructional if we go down these rabbit holes. So if you start to leg drag me and you start to move in, I move into the mantis guard. I'm going to post on your shoulder. When I post on your shoulder, this is important. I'm posting on your shoulder and collarbone area, or I'm posting on the side of your neck. I am not posting on your chest. I can be wrist locked here. Right, like, oh yeah, that's good. Yeah. Like our friend Philippe Matos is kind of famous for wrist locking people from this position. If you're ever in Vancouver, check out Roll Academy. It's a beautiful space, and Philippe's an awesome dude. But just don't ever post your hand on his chest. All right, so if you're ever training with somebody who's good at wrist locks, you'll learn this lesson the hard way. Try to keep your hand on the shoulder, using the heel of your palm, like that. If you let the meat of your thumb fold in, even if you're on the shoulder, you can still end up in that kind of weak wrist lock position. So using the heel of your palm is what you want to do. Now I'm going to start to invert myself while maintaining the lever of the hip, and I'm moving myself into the X guard. So I'm basically moving into a sweep threat. Your response to that should be to retreat because you don't want to be swept. All right? So if we end up later
from
stage,
the top.
yeah.
So we're here. I got the foot. You didn't do anything
I
about
didn't do
that.
anything.
Drag
This,
here, you
I
didn't-
still didn't do anything. You moved in, I frame, and I start inverting. If I can't connect the mantis grip, which is what I'm supposed to do, I'm supposed to go bicep deep and connect my shin, but let's say we end up kind of here. As long as I'm hooking your leg and framing, I should still have the ability to insert my foot in here, start pushing you away, and there we go. We're back to my NoGi De La Riva. If you're on your knees, I'll go to De La Riva X. All right, so we've got these early, mid, and late stages. The late stage ones we're talking about here are still within the context of alignment. It's important to distinguish that, just for troubleshooting purposes, that I'm not talking about like a late stage where you've dragged me and I'm just like twisted up like this, and now I'm gonna try to make something happen, like post on your shoulder and go to the mantis grip. That's not how this works, right? Late stage is just a progression through your passing phases while I'm maintaining my alignment, I'm maintaining my frames, I'm trying to maintain some lever access, I'm moving from here to scooting my hips back, getting my foot on your hip, or moving myself into the X guard, which again should be met with some kind of recognition that you're loading yourself up. You start to move back, I catch your knee, I pull myself back into the De La Riva guard if I'm inclined to keep playing it. So just again, I know I beat this point to death, I'm going to beat it that much more to death. If you have broken alignment, I don't care what kind of moves you know, they're not going to be effective. Maintain your alignment, use frames through every stage of the pass, and you should be able to recover, but most importantly, respond early and you never have to deal with the problems. All right, let's talk a little bit about the knee cut pass now. There's some specific circumstances that have to occur for somebody to try to knee cut you from the De La Riva guard. Like if we're just starting out here, you can't just drive this knee forward and knee cut. You have to strip this hook, and you have to now strip this hook as well. So the way that that's going to occur exactly is your partner's going to post on your leg, and they're going to try to step over this knee while moving this knee across to that hip exactly, hopefully not squaring you in the balls when he does it. But if it happens, we'll have an answer. So this foot is here, or another option, we kind of put our foot on the ground here once in a while just to create like optimal base. In that circumstance, if I lose this De La Riva hook, now again that same thing, posting, stepping over, driving this knee across is going to be how the knee cut is going to occur. So just know that when you're playing the De La Riva guard with either of these configurations, the knee cut possibility exists under those like specific parameters. And if you just do a good job of avoiding them, again, you don't have to deal with the knee cut, right? If I'm doing this, anytime you touch my ankle, if I just grip strip, I don't have to worry about it.
Sure.
If I'm doing this and your hand goes near my knee, I grip strip, I don't have to do this. So if you're just really active with your grip, that's what this hand is for. This hand is for grip stripping when somebody posts on your knees or starts to try to remove this like supplementary leg. But again, we're human, we're gonna screw up. So let's say Stefan checks this, he starts to step over. I recognize that the knee cut is coming. So as this knee draws across my hip, I simply turn my shin and drive, and I can just reset to like a more neutral guard. Or if I manage to keep my ankle grip as Stefan starts to cut across, I'm just pushing it back, using that initial Kazushi. And even if you get a little farther across, just with knee tracking, I just load you up. And you're not gonna wanna stay there because I'm gonna attack your back.
Right.
So you're gonna reset to face me. So again, that initial stage is the one you wanna practice the most. People shouldn't be able to just knee cut your De La Riva guard if you keep this lever mechanic in mind that even if my De La Riva hook is gone, as this knee tracks across here, I still have the ability to use my shin to push into the bend or the pit of my partner's knee while rotating their heel, and that allows me to just reset. So invest most of your time in that first response.
So when you say knee tracking, you mean if my knee starts turning this way, your
Exactly.
knee starts turning
Exactly.
that way?
I actually stole this term from Krishna Murja, who's like Eddie Cummings' original coach. I believe he's gone back to him now, and he uses the term like hand tracking, foot tracking. He does a lot of work with like hand fighting. If you're ever in the New York area, look up Red Dragon Jiu-Jitsu or Texel Jiu-Jitsu. That's where Krishna teaches. So that's his term, and I think it's a pretty good term, so I'm using it. So again, like here, I'm just using knee tracking. I'm following your knee with my knee, keeping my shin in the bend of your knee while maintaining this grip. And you can see like you feel really loaded up right now. You don't want to progress. So you're gonna reset, and we're back into our NoGi De La Riva alignment.
So that's early.
That's early, right? The next stage is you've done this, you started to step over, you started to knee cut, and I didn't manage to track. I'm gonna block your shoulder immediately, and I'm gonna start to elevate you using this inside foot. All right, so I'm basically kicking you in the butt. If I don't check your shoulder, and this is important, there's a reason I'm bailing on this hook. If I don't check your shoulder and I try to elevate you, I either won't or I'll elevate you into a pass.
Right.
All right, so I need to make sure that I can keep your weight about midway. So let's rewind for a second. So you manage to start to step over, you do this, I strip, and then I start elevating you, and then I reset. So once you recognize that your shoulder is being blocked and you can't come down, and I now have the ability to base and kick, you feel your center of gravity shifting. Notice
I'm gonna reset.
You're gonna reset. You can't, like if I'm doing this and you start going forward, then we're coming into like our single legs on our back attacks. So I need to make sure that I'm checking your shoulder, this shoulder. So understand that if Stefan is knee cutting with his right knee, I don't want to check this shoulder. That doesn't help me at all. I'm checking the lead shoulder. Again, if you refer to our guard retention material in the BJJ formula, we call this the leading edge. So we've got the leading edge of the body here or here, whichever part is going to pin you is the leading edge. So right now, your shoulder is about to come in and crush me. I need to block that. So let's rewind slightly. Come back up, please. There we go. You move across. I lost this. I block the shoulder. I put my foot in base. And that's what activated this. It allows
so
me
this
to...
foot goes in base, this foot kicks.
This foot kicks up. And I'm also resetting my hips. Right. If you were a little bit farther down with this knee, I wouldn't be doing this, right? Like I'm no longer able to kick you. This is only viable if you rewind. If you beat this, I didn't knee track, and your knee started to come across. There we go. As long as I'm still relatively pointed at you, I can kick you in the butt, and I can reset my De La Riva guard. The late stage is that we got all the way into the knee cut. My hand has to be here. There's actually two parts to this. One is just, we make our Cosby frame. I pendulum, I rotate, and you'll see this motion in our BJJ formula guard retention thing.
So frame and hip escape.
Frame and hip escape. But if I just really screwed up, we're here and bingo, this happened. As long as I have the presence of mind to keep my forearm or my hand, if we rewind slightly there, I got my hand onto your knee, and I'm going to reverse cross face you. So I'm hooking your armpit with my fingers, just like I would in a normal crossface, and my shoulder is pressing to break your alignment. As I do this, I bridge, and I reset my guard, a more conventional, like either a half guard, closed guard, that kind
What
of
does that look like without me passing the guard?
So as you're coming in, you've hit me with your crossface, I match it, I put my foot on the mat, my forearm blocks. So I'm keeping your knee in this space between my thigh and my forearm. If I don't make that check, that reverse crossface thing, that bridge is just gonna move you into the pass. So I have to make sure that I'm denying the advance. I'm bridging, posting on your knee as I move my hips back and reset my knee back inside. So that's a very late stage. And that one is kind of a, like...
Hail Mary.
It's a Hail Mary, yeah. This is like your reserve shoot, like your mileage may vary kind of thing. Please don't let it go this far. All right.
Let's do it just one more time off the top here.
Sure.
So I've managed to strip.
Yep.
I've managed to stuff.
Yep.
Managed to block your hip. Managed to go here. My foot
Notice-
is still trapped by your leg.
Exactly. You notice my forearm immediately went here. Without this, nothing else is possible. So at the very least, get this done. Because with this, if you start to move in and I manage to like pummel my underhook, man, I'm in great shape. So that's not so much a late stage. That's more like an entry into different things. So yeah, again, we can kind of go down a rabbit hole of like defending guard passes. We didn't want to just give you this option of like, if you're caught, you screwed everything up.
Here,
You're
my foot,
here.
but I've got the
Exactly,
reverse.
but I've got this, yeah. So I activate that reverse crossface. My shoulder tension is activating my posture. If I keep my shoulder rolled, I'm screwed, right? So I want to just kind of recognize what I'm doing, which is activating proper regulated tension. I'm framing your knee. This foot goes into base. I bridge and move my hip back, and I bring my shin inside of my wrist to start to reset my guard. I can't bridge and remove this. I need that placeholder system where I bring my shin in, I can reset my guard. I almost regret that we spent so much time on that late stage one, because really the first one is the one you should be working on. It's the shin tracking, it's the knee tracking, maintaining your alignment in that position, not letting someone get so deep. Do it that way and you're gonna be fine. If you don't know who this handsome gentleman is, this is Matt Kwan. He's a black belt now. Congratulations, buddy.
Thanks.
Black belt who has a school in Pitt Meadows.
That's right, yeah.
Just outside of Vancouver. On Guard BJJ, fantastic school. If you're ever in the Vancouver area, please come train with him. He's been a long-time student of mine. He's helped us out a little bit on the modern leg lock formula, and he's going to be making some appearances throughout this series, particularly in some of the reverse De La Riva material that we're going to present. And he's going to help us out now with dealing with the long step pass. So let's just quickly show you what that's going to look like. Let's just turn this way. So if I get myself into a De La Riva formation, Matt's going to shed the hook, and then by creating like a Y block, access the lever to my hip. He's now going to use his knee to drop to the ground, block my ribs and back step. So that's our long step into position, right? This is the idea behind the pass. It's a much more high percentage pass in the gi, but just because it's more effective in the gi doesn't mean it's not quite effective still in no gi if I don't respond correctly. So the first thing I need to do is recognize that if I allowed this to happen and his knee started to get to the ground, I need to start blocking his ribs. So as he steps through, I'm abandoning whatever I was doing with my ankle grip, and I'm double framing here and just resetting to, again, whatever sort of guard. If he stays on his hip, I may be able to attack. If he pops up, because the full motion, once, so let's kick through, goes here. If he keeps moving, we just end up resetting to some kind of guard. However, the full version of this pass, because if you've ever watched any of my material on passing before, which you can also access at Grapple Arts, the top game and passing sort of formula from the BJJ formula, is if you've ever seen any of that material, you don't pass guards, you pass guard retention movements. So if he's good, he's going to do this passing sequence, and as I follow him, he's going to redirect me into a leg drag. I need to recognize that that's a possibility. As I chase, this lever is accessible. Matt will be moving towards north-south. I have to follow him, because if I don't, he comes around to the other side and finishes the pass. So when I do that, I know he's probably going to redirect. When I feel that redirection coming, I have to be prepared to invert. So we start here, he sheds the hook, moves through to the pass, chases, I invert immediately, and reset my guard. If his knee is up, I can move to De La Hiva. If he's on his knees, I've got to go to butterfly or whatever other guard you play when someone passes the knees. But if we go through that a little bit slower, you'll notice as Matt shoots through to here, I'm blocking. As he changes directions, I'm bringing my elbow underneath me. If my arms stay framing, I'm going to twist my spine up. I won't be able to complete the inversion. So I bring my elbow underneath me while maintaining this frame, and I Granby to my other shoulder, resetting my guard. If you haven't already acquired the ability to Granby, now's the time to get on it, because without that inversion, a lot of your transitional guard retention phase stuff is going to favor your opponent. You need to make sure that you can go from one shoulder to the other, raising your hips, creating a frame between you and your opponent to retain your guard, and that's how you're going to prevent the long step, the no-gi long step, from being successful against your De La Hiva. Okay, our next pass that we have to deal with is the rolling kimura, and this isn't just a pass, this is potentially a submission or back take finish, so we have to be kind of hyper vigilant. I use this pass a lot of the more like modern kind of no-gi submission only guys use this pass a lot. The idea is this hand is free, Matt gains the grip, and now he's going to drive his knee forward and commit to the roll as he connects his hands, ending up here. He can walk into here. If I try to turn, I give up my back. Right? There's reverse triangles, there's all kinds of like crucifix, everything's bad. If I allow him to get there, everything's bad. So the first thing we want to address here, let's just turn this way, here we go. The first thing we want to address is just simple hand fighting. If at any point he grips my wrist, I've got to be breaking and re-gripping. And in particular, anytime he pins my hand to my hip, I know this pass is coming. If there's a gap between my biceps, elbow area, and my rib cage, there's a possibility that he can roll through an attack. So if I lose this hand fight and I can't break the grip here, I'm going to close my elbow to my body. I know this seems like a really kind of like cheap thing to do, but it's like, I just shut your game down, bro. Like Brendan Schaub style. Best jiu-jitsu on the planet. So that's all I'm doing is just closing my elbow to my body, and I know that the roll can't occur now. Or if he does roll, go ahead. Like, it's just not that big of a deal. So you'll see this occasionally if you watch a lot of sub-only, these like abortive kimura rolls where somebody got the wrist grip, rolled through it, nothing really happened. That's occurring usually because somebody managed to either preemptively or partway through the roll, close their elbow and deny access. So that's our early stage response, pretty simple. Hand fight, close your elbow. Now, let's deal with what happens if somebody manages to secure the actual grip on the kimura. I'm gonna follow my back leg, so my butterfly leg, the non-De La Hiva leg, is gonna follow this lever. So as Matt rolls, I'm preventing the full roll from occurring, and at the same time, I extended my right arm, we'll give you another angle in a second, and I took my elbow out of the equation as far as him being able to internally rotate my shoulder. So I'm basically in a berimbolo style position, right? So that's a really good way of responding to the kimura roll. Let's give you this angle. So, and try to like pause, but in midair, not really, but like pause partway through. So let's get here and let's stop right there. Okay, so as Matt rolls, you'll notice my elbow, I'm hooking here, and my elbow, I'm pulling it back through. So let's take this leg up. See how my elbow is closing towards my body. I'm basically re-kimuraing him while maintaining this lever control and this lever control. If my elbow were to be here, he's got the direct angle where this lever can internally rotate my shoulder. So we call this a ratchet lever, where he's using his hand to push down on my wrist while his forearm elevates my elbow. So he's turning my shoulder, he's turning my humerus inside of my glenohumeral joint as you would with a ratchet to like turn a bolt. So this internally rotates my shoulder. Once this happens, it's all him and nothing for me. I have no control. We'll address how to defend this in a few, probably seconds, but our mid-stage response is to prevent that. As Matt rolls through, I'm controlling the lever, extending my leg, which prevents him from completing the roll and allows me to suck my elbow into the ground. Now I can access this leg as a lever. I'm curling my left calf against the pit of his knee. I can reach through and grab his hip, spin him through, and I set my twister hook. We'll give you another angle on that in a second. And you'll notice because my elbow is sucked in, Matt is trapped, I can take his back. That twister hook switch just so you can see from this angle, as Matt rolls through, I'm blocking, pushing my right leg. I'm grabbing his hip. My right leg is going to switch to there. I did that kind of slowly so you can see. I'm hooking around the front of the shin. I don't just want to go like this, because see how Matt already instinctively went to shed that hook. If I'm here, he can't shed the hook. If I'm here, he can shed the hook, and he may be able to regain the Kimura control. So, just keep in mind, now that I've got this twister hook, my elbow is through the gap. It's no longer accessible as a lever directly to my shoulder. I can extend, take the back, and then dig out and finish on my choke. Our final bit of defense, and this is really just defending the Kimura control. Once Matt rolls through, and I wasn't able to gain this control, I find myself here. I immediately bring my hand into his elbow. I'm trying to access this direct lever. I'm going to scoot down as I lift my hand up, and I bench press his arm away from me. I lock out, I create a frame. So if you go to turn into me, there's no way to regain that control. If my elbow is bent, it just becomes a power thing. He can overwhelm me. My elbow is locked out. He can't come back in. And I can now walk in, draw this arm across, accessing that lever, and bringing my arm behind his and switching to Kimura. This is a great drill. If you've got the bjjconcepts.net membership, you have access to the Kimura control module. This drill, we do this all the time to get good at defending and switching the Kimura. Eventually there's a winner, and that person gets to continue on. So that is your defense for the Kimura control. Let's just start quickly with that Kimura grip again so we can recap the details. Elbow control here, biting the ground with my feet. I don't want to try to push right now because Matt is strong isometrically. He's locked his arms out. My arm is bent. I'm not going to beat him with just my arm push. What I am going to do is scoot down and bridge. This is going to allow me to change the angle, and I'm opening. I'm externally rotating my shoulder. I'm opening it up. If I don't find that I'm powerful enough to break this, I'm going to bring my knee inside. And now I won't reverse the Kimura, but there's no way he can finish it. He can't internally rotate my shoulder. I'll just use my shin and withdraw my elbow to break free. So that's your like late stage way of dealing with the Kimura. This is a really good sequence if you're dynamic, you're good with grip fighting, you're good at rolling. It's a very effective move. Don't skip learning how to do proper basic guard passes. Don't be that guy who can only rolling Kimura through the guard. You're gonna suck. But if you're not prepared to deal with it, it's an excellent tool. Make sure that you know every stage, and like I always say, early is better. Grip fight, close your elbow, you won't have to deal with any rolling nonsense. If it happens, there are quite a few stages you can still go through to defend yourself. Familiarize yourself with them, and you're never gonna get got with a rolling Kimura. You don't wanna be on someone's highlight reel. Make sure you're safe. There's a quick troubleshooting thing we need to cover related to the Kimura reversal, is when I'm extending my arm up like this, Matt has the option of withdrawing his hips and putting his foot through the space and going for like the reverse triangle choke, right? Which is a super viable attack. That's why we're so emphatic about not just pushing with our arm and keeping this angle, because now Matt is free to move his hips and insert his foot. If I perform the motion by scooting down and turning, I've changed the angle to make like the difference between this, where there's space for that heel to go through, and this, where it's really difficult for that hip to go through. The fact that I'm bridging and opening my arm up and rotating to my side, my biceps is going across my pec rather than creating this angle where my biceps is not touching my pec. That creates the gap. So understand that this is the design of this Kimura is to feed into either a Kimura, a back take, a crucifix, or this reverse triangle. So if this space exists, expect the reverse triangle to be coming. Make sure that we are turning like this, and there's no way he's gonna get that in without me being able to take this hand and just intercept his foot. And now I'm good. There's no threat anymore. I've broken the position. We can reset and start again. So if you're dealing with somebody who's really crafty and is going to take this through like the iterations that are necessary to create follow-up attacks, you have to be prepared for those follow-up attacks and make sure that your angle is correct to begin with, and that you're not just hoping the other guy doesn't know the next move. Make sure you're prepared for the eventualities, and you should be fine.
All right, another kind of dynamic submission-based pass is the rolling guillotine. This is something I personally use a lot. I think it's fantastic. We got to know how to deal with it. There are a couple of versions that someone can use. The first one is to roll directly over. So if Matt sheds my De La Riva hook and I ignore it, he gets an underhook, rolls with a chin strap, ends up here. He's controlling the lever to my shoulder and he's controlling my chin, which is the lever to my spine, or my hip rather. If I go to turn this way, I can't complete it. If I go to turn this way, I can't complete it because of the chin strap grip. Matt now has the luxury of rolling back into mount and attempting to finish the guillotine, or walking back into side control, like that, or bailing and just turning to north-south. All right? So I have to be really aware of all of those options. The other option here is when he gains the guillotine and the chin, or sorry, the underhook and the chin strap, he does that long step passing motion. So he goes here and ends up over onto this side. The finishes are basically the same. You can roll, you can go to north-south, you can go to side control. Doesn't really matter. It's just in one case he's rolling directly over me, in the other case he's dropping his hip to the side. So let's go back. Awareness and prevention are our first methods of dealing with this. So if at any point, first of all, that hook has to come out. If at any point I feel this coming in, I've got to be repummeling and framing. Like as long as he never underhooks me, I never have to worry about this pass, because he can't just dive roll over my head. Proper posture, not sitting like this. Like this is where you get into trouble. You're working on some bullshit and the guy rolls over you. So I don't crunch up, I don't give my neck, and I don't give my armpit. So that's the first thing, is just understanding how to repummel. Anytime this hand starts to clear this space, I need to be closing my elbow or repummeling and just reconnecting my knee with my elbow, using my kazushi to move him back around. We do not hang out here. Right, this is where people get in trouble, especially later on when we talk about the mantis guard, is they think that mantis guard should involve doing this. You are absolutely going to get guillotined if you try to mantis guard someone in that manner. Right? We make sure we keep our shoulders back. We make sure we keep our posture strong. We make sure we keep our elbow closed. So that prevention will take care of any kind of roll. However, if we get into a scenario where somebody is getting to here and we give up the underhook, and now I know the roll is like from here, that rolling guillotine is pretty much coming. Like he can't knee cut me because I've got this butterfly hook. There's no avenue to knee cut. If we were here, I might be worried about some variation of the knee cut or the knee overpass, but because of this, I can pretty much disregard that. I know he's going to come and roll. As he rolls through, I'm going to be gripping his neck, so performing a claw ride. We'll give you another angle in a second, and I'm keeping this hook. This should allow me to fix my posture and just reset. He'll probably choose to pop back up at this point. He might repummel. We've just reset to a neutral position at the De La Riva guard. If he manages, so let's just, give you that second angle. The claw ride is this. I'm just gripping like the side of his neck. I'm actually trying to reach my fingers around and grip inside of like the sternocleidomastoid muscle. All right? So as he underhooks me, starts to roll over, I'm gripping and I'm trying to keep his posture a little bit broken. If we end up out here with me not having any hooks and he rolls back on top, this no longer really helps me, except in the case of the mount. I will still be able to like try to hip in and finish. If I can keep his posture broken, this might save me a little bit. If I'm not gripping and he can really extend his dick back into it, he's gonna be able to. So this doesn't help me much except in finishing the mount, or preventing the finish for the mounted guillotine. But ideally, I'm following the whole way. The other thing that I want to do here is if we get a little bit later stage and he goes to the side, so he's in here, going like this, I want to try to block his hip. See how my left arm came inside? Now if he goes to get on top, I can always put myself into the half guard. This allows me to start to try to force the knee down and maintain posture to create a back take. This usually won't result in a back take because he'll bail on the guillotine and we'll just end up in some kind of half guard scenario. Like it takes a pretty greedy person to try to work on a guillotine as their elbow is being exposed and their shoulders being internally rotated. There's a pretty good chance that he'll let go at this point, and then as soon as I start to attack here, he's gonna back out
try to overhook under, like whatever. He's gonna recognize the threat and attempt to deal with it. So blocking my partner's hip as they roll through gives me that avenue to always put them back into the half guard. Additionally, if he steps through, or she like long steps with the guillotine, as long as I keep my hand in here, even if I can't corral his hip, I just keep my arm behind his knee pit, go to like technical stand-up, complete anything. It's pretty difficult. I can manage the hook and attempt to come up on top. Even if I end up still in the guillotine at this stage, I'm fighting through the guillotine because I've managed to break his alignment. I've broken his posture. If he manages to start to re-break my posture, I'm gonna have to roll through. And you notice again, I'm checking that knee. In this case, I'm checking the incoming underhook. So you've got a lot of management that you need to do if you don't just keep good posture to begin with and not allow somebody into the underhook. But just know that once somebody rolls through, if you're able to prevent them from performing the technical stand-up, which is doing this, just controlling the lever to the hip or the hip directly. Let's give you a slightly different angle here. So let's say you go to just roll forward now. So I'm controlling his hip and I'm trying to roll back. As he goes to roll back, I've blocked his hip and I've caught him in the half guard and I'm moving myself into a safe position. So just maintaining some kind of check on the hip, whether it's the bicep, the hand, butterfly hooks. It's kind of difficult for me to give you just do A, because you can see like the amount of different options that your partner has. They can roll forward, they can roll back to the mount, they can go to that side, they can go to that side. So as long as I'm just monitoring my partner's hips and making sure that they can't return to a guillotine and hip in and maintain their posture, have a posterior chain extension, I can negate the finish at the end, I can move myself back into a half guard or break free with my posture and just reset to a De La Riva. There are kind of a few moving parts here, so honestly, you're gonna have to just play with this. Like at a certain point, you're just gonna have to do like, if you're familiar with our fuck your jiu-jitsu drills, you're gonna have to fuck your jiu-jitsu like the rolling guillotine. I'm gonna have to like let him get the grips, and then as he goes, I'm trying to like figure out where to go with it, and there I pop my head out and return to butterfly guard. You're gonna have to spar the position a little bit because there are so many moving parts. But again, recognizing the basic principles of alignment, base posture structure, trying to maintain a break of your partner's posture, trying to deny them base or check the lever to their hip will prevent them from returning all the way into a finishing position and hopefully allow you to recover. But as always, start with prevention. A little bit lazy with your alignment breaks and recovering your own alignment. As long as you don't do that, you should be fine.
All right, Rob, can we now get to some super cool De La Riva attacks and submissions?
Yes, we can. Finally. Delayed gratification is the secret to success, Stefan. You should know that. So we've already covered the taint sweep mechanism with the double lever control and the tripod mechanism. Those are actually really high percentage, and we gave them to you in the previous section because it kind of establishes a baseline where that first line of attack forces your partner to be a little bit apprehensive and respect your respect your authority. And then within that context, we can start launching a bunch of different attacks whereby your partner will be either settling down, like let's say I've moved you around a bunch, now you're like, yeah, I need to be really low and not move around. That's gonna set up a sequence that we call the shotgun, which is like the first attack, and it's like, first of all, it's hella cool. Like you wanted cool, this is a really cool attack series. It takes you to the back, it takes you to the leg drag, it takes you to all kinds of different stuff, and it looks really impressive when you do it. We're going to follow up with a couple of other things afterwards, but the idea is those initial two attacks will provoke the sort of, like I said, apprehensiveness that allows us to stabilize the NoGi DLR Hiva guard in a way I couldn't if I didn't do it. If I just camped out here and without doing the kazushi and this imbalancing of the taint sweep, if I just was like, all right, let me take my leg and put it here and launch an attack, you would be too mobile, you'd be shedding this. So in the midst of the context of you defending these movements,
right,
that shotgun mechanism, the other attacks that we're going to show are going to come into play. So it's, like I said, it's important to understand the context. These are high percentage. but those first two are very high percentage as well. Like a lot
So
of
your jab and your cross,
exactly like
or your cross and your other kind of cross.
yeah, exactly. Those are going to create the context for these, let's say, more dynamic attacks that give you a much higher percentage like opportunity to finish, and that's why we've categorized them differently. Those first two attacks are sweeps that only ever get someone on their butt, with you still having to do all the work of passing their guard or leg locking them or whatever. Some of the attacks that we're going to be going through now are going to be so dynamic that they will get you directly to the back, into a sweep sequence that leads into an immediate guard pass, or into a response on your partner's behalf that allows you to attack the guillotine or the omoplata, some kind of submission. So we've categorized these like sweeps and attacks as being more high percentage towards finishing at the end, whereas those first two are more part of just like, I'm going to get to where I need to be, and then I'm going to have to do the previous section and the maintenance section, because it creates the opportunity for us to be really high percentage with our finish now. This is our shotgun mechanism. First, let's go over the naming convention, because I'm generally a fan of just pretty physics-based terms, but occasionally we do need to have a little bit of fun. The idea is, once I step on your hip and I'm winding up my leg, it's kind of like a click, click, boom, and then I'm shooting your kneecap out. Okay, in its simplest form, the shotgun mechanism is me placing, if Stefan's right foot is forward, it's me placing my right foot on his left hip, lifting my hip, turning onto my shoulder, winding my knee up, while keeping my butt on his knee, and then firing this leg through. I hook on the hip and I turn. My butt drops his knee. I'm basically using my butt as like, kind of like a ball and chain, where I'm anchoring it to your knee, making your knee move laterally, causing it to be unstable, and then that swinging weight is going to bring you down. So let's just do that one more time to give you a slightly different angle. So here, the target of opportunity, as we mentioned, is the hip. So if you're in a little bit more of a squat, because if you're really tall, I don't try to fire this. I don't have the platform to step on. So it's up, fire, turn, and then that starts to buckle the knee. We'll have some back attacks. We'll have some other options. But now that you understand the basic mechanism, let's do some kind of deep debugging of what could potentially go wrong, common errors, and make sure you're on the right track technically every step of the way. The context for this, if you skipped over all the rest of the material, in which case, I'm not angry, but I am disappointed. The context of this is I have moved you around, created some kind of kazushi, and you've started, just to really base down, and your hands aren't immediately available to push my knees down. Like if we're here and we're gonna address this in some troubleshootings and like pass prevention type stuff, but if I'm here and I've won a grip, particularly on this side, although if I win this grip and can kind of move you around, I can often create the opportunity to step on your thigh. That's the context for this. I certainly don't start out with my NoGi DLR guard having done nothing else and just plant my foot here and go.
So if I'm off balance, do you need a grip?
No.
Okay.
No, if you are, let's say, this is happening,
Okay.
I will absolutely launch this attack.
Okay.
Yeah, anything that prevents your hands from blocking my foot from stepping on your hip, or from blocking my knee as I attempt to fire the shotgun. If you're camping out with your hand on my knee, that's not a huge deal, because the like click click part sheds your hand. But it's critical, in fact it's absolutely critical, that I prevent you, or circumstances prevent you from pushing this off, because if I attempt to fire this, I'm really vulnerable right now. Like, this is not good. This is where I could actually get punched in the balls in the street fight, and it would actually work. So, anyway, so when I've created the proper context, kazushi, moving you around, now I'm good to fire. The actual mechanism itself, this is really important. My butt tracks your knee. If I'm fairly tall, but if I'm shorter than my opponent and I manage to get out here, I'm not going to be able to engage the far hook, which is what I need.
So I'm eliminating that problem, and I'm eliminating the flexibility problem. A lot of people who try to play any sort of deep De La Riva hook, they're like, I'm not flexible enough. No, the movement is wrong. If I'm here and my butt is on your knee or on the side of your knee, I can insert this hook with relative ease. I don't have to be tall, I don't have to be flexible. Okay? So, both of those things help, but they shouldn't be a substitute for correct technique. It's like, it helps to be tall and good looking, but it's no substitute for having a lot of money. So let's make sure that we know what we're getting into. Our butt is on our partner's knee. Our foot is seeking the far knee. We used to play this here at the hip. This isn't wrong, it certainly can still be effective, but what I'm trying to now do is rotate my hip against your knee to buckle you. If you have the luxury of stepping forward with your knee, so if I do both feet to the hip and I start to turn and yeah, exactly. You can actually recover your alignment much easier than if I lift my hip, go onto my shoulder and block your knee. Now, as I start to push, if you try to recover your alignment,
No, too much pressure on the knee.
too much pressure on the knee. So this is like, in our academy we call this the shotgun 2.0, because for the first year or two that we did this, we were going both feet on the hips. For now, and until we come up with a better version, 2.0 is one foot on the hip, my butt on the side of your knee, and I'm using my hand here for balance just because we're pausing and I'm talking. Normally I won't need that. It'll be kind of a quick motion here. Okay. I am still gripping and trying to open the heel to aid that, but that's not a huge contributing factor. I'm rotating onto my shoulder. The other thing that screws people up here is they're flat on their back and trying to make this happen with flexibility. I'm pushing off, like I'm kind of like stepping on a ladder to lift my hip and turn onto my shoulder. When you drill this, you can pause here. And if you can't pause here with your butt on your partner's knee and your foot on the hip, then you just need to work on this more. This winds up, shoots through, my other foot is hooking, and I'm turning and trying to drop you. So you can see how there are a couple potential directions that you can fall. And in the subsequent videos, we're gonna go over what our finishing options are based on our opponent's reaction. But when your knee buckles, and this is an important safety thing, when you're learning this, if you're the uke, don't be the guy who's fighting this lateral pressure on the knee. When you start to feel this, turn and let your knee come down. I have seen it happen where people are too insistent on fighting this because they've been taught that everything in jiu-jitsu is perfectly safe except for knee reaping, which explodes your knee instantly. It's like, well, I'm not in a knee reap, I can do whatever the hell I want with my knee. That's actually not true. The De La Riva guard is more dangerous to the passer's knee than most knee reaping situations. So do not insist, think about it. I weigh about 180 pounds and I'm launching myself laterally into the side of your knee. I think that's redundant. If it's laterally, then it's definitely into the side of your knee, right? So you don't want to be the guy that's trying to tough out my body weight going sideways like that. MCL and LCL are going to be at risk here. So as an uke, it's incumbent on you to make this motion to keep your knee safe, especially if we're talking about repeated reps with any level of intensity. So now that we've mentioned that, we can move on to what the subsequent attacks are going to be once you initiate the shotgun mechanism. All right, let's start to cover how we're going to use our shotgun mechanism to attack our partner's back. As I mentioned earlier, because there are whatever circumstances where the hands are not available to defend this space, I step on the hip, I wind up the shotgun, I fire it through, my partner's knee buckles. I'm still holding the ankle, I'm going to insert the deep De La Riva hook. If I just keep this hook, there's a possibility, keep rolling over your right shoulder here, Stefan, that you just sweep yourself and I come up on top. That's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. Sure. But if I have the opportunity to create that hook there, it's going to stop you from being able to roll. So that's the first thing.
Or if I roll.
Or if you roll, I'm going to follow you and probably end up in the mount. So if we got ourselves here, your knee buckled, we come down, I make that hook. So the foot that was stepping on the hip in the shotgun is going to come back here and block the ankle. I'm going to grab Stefan's hip now. So now, before, I had control of the lever to Stefan's right hip here with my ankle grip, and I had control of Stefan's left hip with my hook, but as we've changed position, this is no longer my right arm. This is no longer meaningful control because Stefan's knee has hit the ground. And the only thing I can add to that by pulling is to continue to rotate him in that direction. I don't want that. So I'm abandoning this grip while making this one and catching his hip. If for whatever reason you can't make this hook fast enough, it's important that you sit up and block the hip anyway. So if that roll were to occur now, you would just be rolling into me taking your back, which hopefully you would know not to do. Right? So there's kind of two versions of it. Get the hook, great. If not, your hand has to abandon the ankle, your left hand in this case. If it's against your partner passing right, has to go to the hip. So we are here and here ideally, and now I'm sitting up. So now I'm attached, my thighs are pinching, I'm attached to the direct lever to your hip, which is your right femur, and I'm grabbing your hip. This hand will usually be on the mat, trying to maintain base. Right? I don't really need to address this because the adjustment that Stefan's making to spread his base out is creating the opening that I need to climb up if I need to, and then take his back. Or, if you post that foot forward, post the other foot, yeah, exactly. So if we're here, or I'll be able to pull and buckle him anyway, and then scoot back and take his back. So it doesn't really matter. This is not an answer for anything, because once I've got the dominant angle to your back, you staying in base. One of the definitions, and I apologize for the tangent if my voice bores you, but then why are you watching this product? Go complain on Reddit about me. One of the notions that we have, or the definitions that we have about base, is your base is a platform from which to apply and absorb force, yes, but it's relative to your opponent and it's relative to your goals.
I'm in a great position to apply force
That way, right? So once I'm here, you can have fantastic base in that direction. All that's doing is giving me a really stable platform to climb your back. So we just want to recognize that sometimes, you know, it's one of those like win the battle, lose the war deals. Like, yeah, you didn't get swept, but you gave me your back. So this is not a suitable response for preventing a back take. So I don't care if you post your hands at that point. I'll either cup your bicep and climb, or I'll just kind of jump up, shoot the seatbelt on you, take you out of base.
To the people who don't think this works, who probably haven't watched this far, but to the people who don't think this works, who have watched that far, that is one hell of a clamp. Like, that's about as good a clamp as you can get in NoGi, other than a full-on
yeah.
backpacker.
When we get into our mantis guard section,
Sure, that's another great clamp.
and we go over we call it the shotgun X, when the shotgun is launched out of the mantis, because we're able to get that clamp up higher. And you can actually hang off of somebody in that clamp position and just bring them down. So this motion here, this is like, I can be like, look, Mom, no hands, and Stefan can kind of try to move around, and I'm not really going anywhere. I mean, you can use that hand.
Without taking the time
Right.
to completely deconstruct.
Exactly.
But that'll take time.
And while you're doing that, I'm already climbing on your back, I'm choking you, exactly. So like these moves don't exist in a vacuum, and I do think, you know, not that I want to knock keyboard warriors. So no, wait, yes I do, they're morons who, you know, expound on the internet without the necessary experience to back it up. But like they tend to view things in like a turn-based role-playing game sort of thing, where it's like, I'm gonna do A and then stand here while you do B. It's like, yeah, you could do certain things, but I'm climbing your back and choking you at the same time. So yeah, you could maybe try to hit me, but I'm also imbalancing you and hitting you and all that kind of stuff. So like, you know, a fight is between two people who are simultaneously trying to achieve opposing goals. And if you don't really understand that, then like, I don't care how fast your internet is. You know, there's nothing we can do about your lack of fundamental understanding about an underpinning of the universe, you know, which is that's what fights are. So if I get to this dominant angle and I've got this clamp in and you're like mucking about doing something, you know, I'm moving here and I'm taking your back and I'm choking you. So yeah, like it's a stable position that allows me to launch a very effective attack. If you want more material on back attacks, there's probably something out there.
Well, if there was, what would we call it, or what should they?
Maybe the BJJ formula.
Back attack formula.
Back attack formula. Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah. Anyway, our next option for attacking out of the shotgun is going to be the leg drag, and this requires a little bit of context because, first of all, most of the time that you fire the shotgun, your partner is going to buckle their knee and go forward. Occasionally, when people are, let's say, a little more surprised by the movement, and they lose a little bit of balance backwards and they fall to their butt,
you're gonna be tempted to try to come up in the mount. We're gonna go over what that will look like. In my experience, this only works against people who aren't familiar with the position, and hopefully right now you know what my feeling is on moves like that. If something only works because you haven't seen it before, it's probably not the greatest movement. So at my academy, I can never get the shotgun to the mount transition to work against my brown belts. I can definitely get the shotgun to the back or the shotgun to the leg drag. So those are the attacks that we want to focus on. So again, the presumption here is that I've fired the shotgun and Stefan falls backwards. Exactly, we're gonna kind of end up here like this. We're gonna go over the berimbolo option here a little bit later, but the temptation here is to like post on your hand and just come up into the mount. It looks super available. The problem with that is if you're not trying to sit up, if you just go to your back and you start blocking my leg as I try to come up, I'm just gonna end up in some kind of guard.
No.
It's unlikely that I'm going to be able to
Like this big long lever in
yeah,
front of me.
when it does work, and then again context is kind of important, but when it does work is when I'm here and you are on your hands and really trying to avoid the sweep, then I can come up, mount, and maybe even guillotine. But I would say that that's, like I said, it's a lower level response, usually performed by someone who's not familiar with the position and is really trying to resist the fact that they got surprised, knocked to their butt, and they're trying to land like that. So that's the context. If you're there, if you find yourself there, totally legit, because if someone's hands are on the mat, they can't be defending the leg shooting across, they can't be defending the mount, go to it. However, you landed here and you're on your back and your legs are, or your hands are available. If I try to mount you, you will frame, right? So I'm gonna avoid that temptation. I'm gonna roll through like I'm attempting a berimbolo motion, my top leg, so the one that would have moved into the mount. I'm grabbing my hip with the right hand. That leg is going to move in behind your knee as this leg withdraws, and then I'm switching into the leg drag. My right hand comes out for base, my left hand checks your hip. My right foot will give you another angle in a second, goes into base as I move into the leg drag, setting my foot at roughly a 45-degree angle with my knee slightly bent. I don't want it too straight out here because I don't have base to this side, and my leg being straight only performs the action of absorbing force and only does that in one direction. If my knee is bent, I'm mobile, I can generate force, and I can adjust the angle of my base. So it's important that my leg not be straight here. Let's
Show that from the other side.
from the other side, exactly. So for here, I happen to fire the shotgun, you happen to fall backwards, and I'm thinking about doing this, and I realize, oh no, Rob told me not to. We invert through, shoot, and transfer. We're essentially moving kind of through a crab ride, except with my shin on the inside rather than on the outside like this. So I've transferred, I went from this shin to this shin, withdrew my arm, and I cover your hip. It's important that I cover your hip because if I attempt to get up now, right, your foot can go in the way, you can hip escape, you can attempt to Granby, right, there are all kinds of options here where like you might turn away, start to Granby, and now I've lost you. Exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
grab me and roll off the mat.
Yeah. So, if we go really slowly here, I've landed with the De La Hiva hook, and we're here like this. I invert, my right shin goes in the bend of your knee while I grab the other hip. I use my shin to extend and switch, and then I pull you into the leg drag. So my hands are actually collapsing, my arms are collapsing, my elbows are coming to my body, and now my elbow moves in front of your hip with my hand covering the side of your hip. In the gi, we have the luxury of making like a collar grip and closing the elbow here. In no-gi, we're gonna close our elbow here. I'll be kicking to deny you base while my knee turns in and my left foot flares. If all I'm doing is this, Stefan can get his legs into different alignments. I wanna make sure that I'm controlling the lever to his hip here with my elbow closed, and the lever to his hip here with my knee turning in and my foot, like the edge of my foot, flaring out against his shin. So if you try to put this foot in base,
No, can't.
exactly. You've got some base from this leg, but me closing this denies you the ability to use it like effectively. So you can bridge, but that doesn't really help you. Again, base is relative to our opponent and it's relative to our goal. So your goal is to try to turn and face me you bridging in that direction doesn't help you do that.
And just in case guys aren't familiar with the leg drag position, what would be your basic finish from there?
Yeah, so by keeping my knee turned in, I'm denying the base this way, getting my foot into a good angle here. The next thing that's usually gonna happen is you're gonna be framing me. So there are two ways to deal with a frame. I'm going to change the angle relative to the frame. So I might rotate my chest around it, or I can disconnect and redirect. I can move myself into a passing position this way, or I can disconnect and redirect and move into a arm triangle or back take type of situation this way. Important that I don't just, I always refer to this like a video game glitch where you see a character just like running into a wall over and over again. I don't do that against the frame. I don't just run myself against a solid piece of skeletal structure. I change the angle, or I disconnect and redirect. And that allows me to finish, again, with a combination of what is my preference, what I've developed, and what is my partner's reaction. There's not always going to be one way that it goes. There's going to be a confluence of the two. If you're prepared for the different likely reactions, which is your partner will either turn away in frame or they'll turn in frame, and each one has its own response. Again, this isn't a passing instructional. There's some material out there you might be able to find on that, and yeah, enjoy. This transition does take a fair bit of drilling. There's a lot of, like you've noticed, there's some leg work, there's some switches. So, you know, like with the shotgun to the back, it's a relatively easy thing. Well, easy. It's simple, and there aren't a ton of transitions. You drop the person's knee, you grab their hip, and you're in business. With this one, you drop them, you have to grab one side of the hip, you have to grab the other side of the hip, you have to invert, you have to switch one shin, then switch the other shin, then switch your base. There are like probably 7 or 8 distinct movements. So, you know, just as you might imagine, you increase the complexity, you're going to increase the drilling time, you're going to increase the amount of time from when you learn it to when you can apply it. So, like, don't expect to run out and do this one right away. Start with the shotgun to the back. It's the more likely and more high percentage option. When someone gets buckled, be ready to, you know, like if you've already got a Berimbolo game, then you're great. Like, you'll just plug this right in, right? But if you're developing it, just know that you're in for a bit of a ride. All right, you're gonna run into scenarios where you attempt the shotgun sweep, or you use the shotgun mechanism, and your partner doesn't buckle their knee. This is gonna occur either because you make a mistake, or sometimes like there's enough of a size disparity, or there's a level of athleticism involved that makes it hard for you to buckle the knee. In that case, we're gonna move into a position called the Corolla, which I will explain the naming convention on that in a later video. So what we're talking about here is I launch my attack, but Stefan stays put. So if I try to like turn and buckle his knee, all that's going to happen is I'll slip back down to the De La Riva guard, which isn't the end of the world. But you know, the shotgun mechanism is an opportunistic attack. So if I get a crack at it, I don't want to bail, reset, and start again. So what I'm going to do is, if you've ever seen a V-up, which is like an abdominal exercise, I'm basically doing a lateral V-up to the far leg. So I launch. I don't get anywhere with this. I pull and I drop. Like, part of this is me bringing you back. The other part is me moving in.
I assume if I'm 100 pounds heavier than you, it's mostly you
It's
moving.
mostly me moving, exactly. So my position has switched to where my right shin is in the pit of Stefan's knee. I will either have underhooked the leg or overhooked the leg. Usually underhook, because I'll be going from here and I'll be reaching. So sometimes you'll barely be able to get this. So the idea of reaching all the way around the front, unlikely unless you move the other person a lot. So most of the time, let's assume that we did this. Our De La Riva hooking leg is dropping around our partner's ankle to immobilize it, as our far leg shifts around into the pit of our partner's knee. Our goal is to be gripping our partner's hip on this side, sometimes on this side. If I can't make the grip on this side, I'm definitely going to grip on this side, and I'll be attempting to push my shin into my partner's knee. This one's pretty damn hard to do slow. Let's give a slightly different angle here. So this time, yeah, get into a good squat, be like really stable. I fire, I pull myself in, and I grip. And you can see how it's tipping me backwards. So usually when we talk about the Corolla position, it's actually this. It's me getting you on your back, although we do also use it where, if you stand back up for a second, where I'm just here. Right? All this is nowhere near as advantageous, obviously, because you have base. And this shouldn't exist in a vacuum. I don't want to get here without any motion. Like, we talked about, I woke up one morning, I'm in a certain position. This isn't helpful to me without the momentum.
Right.
If I manage to move you, like you notice how when we were in motion, you felt like you either had to lean forward to regain your base, or you would get tipped backwards. That's when it works. If you end up here, like we'll cover what to do if it happens, but ideally, it's a position that you arrive at moving into it, so that you end up, part way into a sweep position.
So that last time you did it, you had to move a lot because it was very
Yes.
planted. Let me just become magically lighter, and can you show what happens if you're doing this on somebody smaller, lighter, or more?
You end up moving them quite a bit, yeah. So like when I go to do this, they get pulled over and just drop to their butt.
So your body angle didn't change it that much.
You just get flung around, and we end up here with like that shin in the knee pit, and then we'll go over what to do from here. But this is an incredibly advantageous position for me because your hands have to stay on the ground. Well, they've got to land on the ground, otherwise you're just falling backwards and I'm immediately getting up, which means you don't have the ability to interfere with any of the stuff I'm doing. There are going to be transitions to the back from here. There are going to be transitions to the leg drag from here. It's a very kind of dynamic and versatile position that comes as a result of what could have otherwise been a potential failure, right? Like not being able to buckle the knee. That's our main purpose with the shotgun sweep, so this is a really good follow-up. Without this, you're going to be vulnerable to that bigger, stronger athletic, or just you screwing up and not being able to buckle the knee. That's an eventuality you have to deal with, and that's when we go to the Corolla. This is the Corolla, and I've done it wrong. And the reason I say that is because Stefan is standing perfectly still. The objective when we move into the Corolla, as you may have picked up on from the previous video, is that it's a transitional movement that involves some momentum that will allow you to have your partner tilting, and he'll either go forward, in which case we'll be following up with back attacks or doubles or singles, or when he feels himself going forward, he'll sit back, in which case we'll pull him over and move into leg drags or back attacks. So the position is, again, transitional in nature. It's not somewhere you want to go to without that initial shotgun mechanism, without that little bit of kazushi. A little background on the naming convention, since again we tend to just say, hey, frame and lever with everything. At our academy, we're certainly not above occasionally poking fun at the world's most gullible contrarian. And he has a naming convention called the truck, which is a position that you control to get to a few different things. So I happen to drive a Toyota Corolla, or at least I used to exclusively drive a Toyota Corolla. And one of the students at my academy said, well, we should call this a Corolla because it kind of gets you where you need to go, but it's maybe not the fanciest mode of transportation. You're not going to look good doing it, but you'll get where you need to. And so yeah, it gives us several options. Again, I'll beat the point to death. If you get there and the other person isn't moving, you've done it wrong. So let me just quickly reiterate how this needs to look. When you are firing the shotgun and your partner is rigid, you're pulling in, and you can see how while you're in motion, I managed to pull you down. Right. If I can't pull down on your hip on either side, it should be because you're leaning forward.
So,
right?
You've ended there, and I've got, oh crap, I'm not going to my butt again.
Exactly.
Now we're here.
And now I can start to come up.
Perfect.
All right, so we'll go over all of the options that occur from here, but just recognize that in the learning phase and the development phase, when you're practicing the transition to the Corolla, if your partner is staying completely upright and not tilting forward or backwards slightly, it means you didn't create enough momentum, or when you were getting to the position, you didn't pull on their hips. So it's again, it's hard for me to do this, suspend myself in midair.
You're so good, it's hard for you to do it wrong.
well, no, it's hard for me to do it slow, is what I'm saying. So, but I'll try to kind of pause along the way. So if I'm moving myself through to here, and I got all the way to here without grabbing your hip in the transition while my body was swinging through the air, then you'll be able to stay stable, because there's nothing, again, we're talking about a lever mechanic, right? So if I'm not controlling the source of the lever, your center of gravity there, the fact that I'm gripping your legs is pretty irrelevant. You may be able to extract. So we have to remember that when I'm making the transition, as I go from here to here, and I start to bring my body forward, again, I'll try to do it in slow motion, this or this has to be happening as I now pull myself into you. So you can see that shift is what causes the potential sweep backwards or you overcorrecting and bringing yourself forward. If we're not able to connect ourselves to our partner's hip some way, the position is not likely to work.
So now the question becomes, how do you finish from this unusual tipped over, half sitting on top of you position against a good opponent?
Exactly. So we'll be maneuvering into the leg drag, we'll be maneuvering into back attacks, we'll be maneuvering into doubles or back attacks, like going forward, chasing the back, as opposed to back attacks going underneath the person. We've got about 4 or 5. Those will follow this video. And again, drill the entry, get the kazushi, then worry about the attacks. Please don't skip on getting good at this swinging motion and tilting your partner. Everything is based on that. All right, so now that we've kind of identified the Corolla, the first option you're usually going to see, and it depends on whether I've got this hip or the far hip, but when I start to spin in behind, if my partner doesn't want to go forward, or if they start to go forward and realize that they're going forward and they don't want to expose their back, they're going to try to sit, which is going to allow me to pull them onto my hip and elevate this leg, drop them to their back. So what we're going to be doing here is moving into the leg drag from this position. The first thing I'm going to do is switch my leg. So my right shin is in the pit of Matt's knee, which gives me the lever to his hip. You notice how every time I do this extension, if Matt doesn't want to fall, he has to put his hands on the mat. So expect people to do that. Expect them to put their hands on the mat rather than just fall to their back. Although people who are super eager to play guard, let's say, will not do that. They'll just drop to their back and attempt to do guard retention. So just, like, again, be aware of those two eventualities, but know that you'll usually experience a little bit of tension here. This leg's gonna circle in. I'm not lifting my leg and creating all this space. I'm withdrawing it slightly. So I'm kicking it free and circling it underneath. As I do that, I'll now be switching my right knee out as my left knee comes in. It's almost like I'm trying to spear him in the abdomen, although that won't usually happen. Once I've done that, I'm accessing the lever to his hip by internally rotating my hip and flaring his calf muscle out while I bring my arm in front and I close my elbow. This is going to allow me to extend away, post my head on the mat if necessary, lift my hips and withdraw my elbow to base. This allows me to rotate into the leg drag position, keeping my knee slightly bent. I don't want to be straight because, again, I don't have good base. I can be pushed backwards. So when I land into the leg drag position, I'm good to go. My elbow is closed. I'm still flaring this foot out to deny him base. If I allow him to put his foot on the mat, he can potentially derive base from it, hip escape, and reset his guard. So I'm constantly making that flare. So that's how we're going to move into the leg drag. Again, know that when we land here, so let's get you on your butt and we'll start in the landed position. So when we land here, when somebody chooses not to put their hands on the mat, they just go immediately to their back. There's a decent likelihood that they'll be framing with their hands and hip escaping and trying to get off of your hooks. So know that the transition here is a little bit different than if somebody's on their hands. If he's on his hands, he's trying to stay in base and I'm knocking him back. I'm overwhelming his base. When we land here and he goes directly to his back, he's probably going to be hip escaping away from me. So I'm not knocking him back anymore. I'm making sure that this knee doesn't get in between us. I'm getting to here, I'm getting to here, start hip escaping, try to move into guard. I'm following and I'm chasing him. So let's just address that quickly because it's a slightly different mechanism. Just go on your back. Anytime we land in this position where our arm is underneath and we weren't able to switch in front of the hip, but our partner does manage to get that knee, yeah, exactly. He gets his knee in front. This is exactly what we're talking about. If I don't push on this lever and turn his hips in that direction, he's just going to hip escape, reset his, yeah, exactly. He's going to pummel, he might leg attack me, all kinds of bad things can happen. So what I'm looking to do is, I don't worry about this because I can't control this. This is too strong, like his hip flexor, his like posterior chain, that's connecting his leg to the mat. This is a proper frame. What I can do, however, is use both my hands to build my base and use this leg to rotate him back into the leg drag position. So there's a slight distinction between the two types of players, people who are trying to stay up and people who are just immediately going to their back and trying to defend their guard. Frankly, it's a better idea to go to your back and try to defend your guard. Trying to stay upright here, I'm pretty much guaranteed to finish the leg drag. if you immediately drop, go to your back please. If you immediately drop to your back and start hip escaping, if I don't gain enough control of this, and then immediately enough control of that lever, you're gonna get your guard back. So I have to recognize that, like this is a legit threat. Sitting up on your hands, this is nothing, I don't care. Like I will eventually put you on your back and finish you. So I'm not worried about people who are doing this, I'm more worried about people who are doing this. Know the difference. One is just come up in base and finish. The other is both hands have to come in and you're turning them, rotating, using the lever of the hip to rotate them facing away from you, and is a little bit more difficult and frankly requires a little bit more confidence because you're disconnecting. In the main one, just going back please. In the main one, I've got this and I'm maintaining my connection to the hip and all I'm doing is building my base. And the other one, I shouldn't say the main one, but the one where they're sitting up. And the other one, he's already partially recovered his guard and I gain nothing from gripping here. I need to let go completely and have enough confidence that this motion will rotate him and rotate me back in front of him. And that can be a little bit tricky when we're dealing with like no-gi, sweaty, the guy's got a good guard. So you're gonna have to build it up a little bit more than the first one. The first one's relatively straightforward. The second one, like I said, more reps, more confidence, more timing, but equally as effective. All right, this next movement, I'm gonna be honest, you're not gonna need it unless your partner kind of screws the pooch. This is not something that a like, highly schooled person will likely do, but I have seen it happen quite a bit where we land in this position here, out of the Corolla, we're getting ready to transfer to the leg drag, and because they're kind of wary about the leg drag itself occurring, people, for whatever reason, get it in their head that it's a good idea to try to walk me back this way. As I go, yeah, exactly. This is just giving us the ability to float someone. So anytime someone does that, you should be able to just like tilt them into a back attack. So we're gonna go from the Corolla, we attempt the leg drag, right? Like we land here, we transfer into here and we're attempting the leg drag. If someone lifts, as soon as they do, just make sure that you capture their hip. So we're taking our right hand. If I'm like passing to my right side, my partner's left, right? I'm taking my right hand and I'm just cupping their hip. As he moves forward, I just make sure that I kick him and load him up with my left elbow, jamming his knee in. So if he goes to complete the turn, all that'll ever happen is I'll come up on top like that. So the best case scenario for him is he gets swept and I land pretty much directly in side control on the other side. If they managed or they insist on staying kind of floated, so if somebody kind of pushes forward, yeah, and stays here, now I switch from the hip to the shoulder and I'm gonna push this knee back while I set my twister hook. Still controlling the lever to the hip, still controlling this lever to the hip. I'll usually snatch the motorcycle grip on the way, rotate my partner as I attempt to slide the rear naked choke in place. I don't want to devote a ton of time to this because, like I said, you're a little bit asleep at the switch if you do this. Like if you haven't learned by now that moving up and giving somebody the option of going underneath you to take your back, not the swiftest thing to do. Go back to the drawing board a little bit. Go back to the fundamentals class. You shouldn't be messing around with this stuff. But the fact of the matter is people do it, and whenever you introduce somebody to a position they've never seen before, even if they're highly skilled, sometimes like we tend to teach jiu-jitsu in a pretty conceptual manner. So I'd like to think that just about anybody I train or anybody that is trained in this manner, when they see something new, they'll do the right things because they recognize the concepts at play, they recognize alignment, they recognize frames, levers, base posture, all that stuff. Some people, when they see something new, they're like, I have not learned move 57A, so I damn well don't know what counter 56B looks like, so maybe I'm gonna move in a funny way. Right? You get your black belt. It doesn't mean, like I think Ryan Hall made this point, doesn't mean that you level up at every position. You don't become a black belt at everything you do. So if you do this on someone and they've never seen it before, they don't have to be unskilled or a neophyte. They could just be a neophyte to that position and they make the error once. I doubt they're gonna make it again if they're skilled, but it is a possibility. And certainly if you're dealing with people who aren't overly skilled at jiu-jitsu, but fairly skilled at wrestling or any kind of like top game type grappling art where they might think that they can just beat you, get on top, move around. So you just got to be aware. As long as you keep their hips floated, you will be able to take their back. Like I don't mean to shit on people too hard, although sometimes I do. You might not just be a phoebe if you get this done to you. You might just be new to the position and different type of grappler. But as long as I keep my partner's hips corralled and maintain the lever control wherever they go, so we just demonstrate this one more time. Wherever my partner goes, if he lifts his hips up and I just connect to them, where if he keeps moving, wherever we go, I'm going to be behind him. Because I'm continuously checking this knee, right, I will be able to shoot this hook in at a certain point, catch this lever, and now I've got that cross body style control that we've talked about in some of our other material, which you can access bjjconcepts.net or grapplearts.com, the BJJ formula material. Once I've got that cross body control, you're pretty much screwed. I'm going to be on your back. I've got the lever to your hip. I've got the lever to your shoulder. I'm going to be able to attack you in some way. Don't make this mistake. I guess the real lesson here is if you're here, get your back to the floor. In the position to do this, make sure you exploit this error because that's what it is. So we talked about in the previous videos when our partner reacts by tilting backwards and we've pulled them down and we've attacked the back going underneath or we've attacked the leg drag. However, a lot of times, either because your partner knows that the backward pull is going to result in that set of attacks and they choose to overcompensate going to this side, or sometimes just as you transition into the Corolla, just the act of pulling on the hip, they'll feel themselves going backwards and they'll overcommit to going forwards. Option A will occur when somebody drops to their knee. When this occurs, depending on whether my hand was on this side of the hip or on this side of the hip, if it was on this side of the hip, my life's a lot easier because Stefan dropping forward will pull me up into base. If I'm here, I have to get myself up into base, and that's going to be a little bit tricky. Let's just make sure that we understand that as soon as my shin comes out, there's nothing keeping him down. So he can lift his knee up and run away. So if you feel tempted to go from here to kicking this leg out and try to attack, it's unlikely that you're going to get anywhere. We have to make sure that if I'm on my shoulder, I need to turn, let's just rotate a little bit more this way. I need to turn myself up while driving my shin into the bend of the knee and still controlling the side of the hip. So I'm going to do that by pulling up on Stefan's thigh. So start to try to move away from me. That's the idea. Is if you try to move away, it pulls me up. So it doesn't matter if you run at that point because I'm using your momentum to pull me up. If you just stay put, it's actually a little bit harder. I've got a base on this hand, which means when I do, this leg might be able to move, which is where it becomes doubly important now to be connecting my chest to your calf area while controlling here. So I build my base, go underneath, and I'm gripping the hip. I'm still keeping my shin in the pit of your knee, and I'm leaning on it because I don't want you to raise this knee. Now I'm gonna switch and move my knee in front while I seatbelt you. So once I can afford to bring my weight to this side, now I know you can't run from me because I've replaced, my shin was blocking your knee to prevent this side of your hip from fleeing. Once I bring my weight over that hip, I can remove my knee because I've replaced the placeholder. I'm controlling this hip with my ribs now. So now if you wanted to try to come up, it doesn't really help. I'll just jump your back.
Sure.
So we're going to assume that you'll either stay put or, again, if you were to run, I'd jump your back. But now my knee is coming in front of your knee and I'm hitting my seatbelt. Let's rotate a little bit to your left. My leg is still keeping your ankle trapped. This allows me to create this rotation which pulls your hip down. As I do that, I'm going to go dead toes. So I'm dragging you over top of my shin. Let's rotate again. My knee was inserted. My seatbelt is in. I set my hook, scoot my hip back, set my second hook, and I can start attacking the back.
Can we take it all the way from the top rope?
Absolutely we can. Let's start with the shotgun mechanism itself. I fire, I move to the Corolla, you tilt forward under your knee. I follow you up. My shin stays in the pit of your knee. I climb, grab the hip, move myself over, then I can remove my knee. I shoot my seatbelt. My right knee comes in and I simultaneously drag you. That allows me to shoot my hook. I scoot up. Ideally I'm on my elbow. If you don't already have the back attack formula and you go out and get it, you will learn that there's a world of difference between being on my elbow, ready to attack, and being on my shoulder where your defense is set and I have poor base. So if I'm on the strong side, this is not the strong side if I'm on my shoulder. It's the strong side if I'm on my elbow. So there's a big distinction. Make sure we know that. Obviously, if your partner insists on staying up, we just jump the back. So if we get ourselves to here and somebody's just really rigid, we jump the back, put both hooks in, start working on the choke. Kind of extra tip here, if you lift up, please, Stefan. If I'm kind of sliding off the top, going double underhooks here and picking one side is a really strong way to break someone down before we attack. So don't be that guy who gets on the back and then has somebody like shake them off the top. It's kind of an embarrassing way to go out.
Sure.
All right, so double underhooks, pick a side. When I say pick a side, I mean insert the hook kind of low and use your hip to knock their base out of the way. Double underhooks prevent you from getting dropped off the top. Your partner buckles, you can reset the attack. And not something that is going to happen a lot because most of us aren't training with, higher level MMA fighters or wrestlers, but both of those guys will do that. So, if you're interested in progressing through the sequence against somebody who's going to give you a pretty typical like high level wrestling based response, make sure that you understand that that's got to be a possibility. And again, we'll go over this a little bit more in the next video, but if the knee is down, we attack this. You don't try to do this if someone immediately pops to both legs. That's going to create a different response. I don't have the luxury of restricting your movement while I climb my base or build my base up and climb to attack your back.
Placeholder.
So we've landed ourselves in the Corolla position. Our partner's chosen to post their hands forward. We're not going to have the luxury now of attacking the back because Stefan's knee is not on the ground. I have to come up and chase like a double single type attack. What's important here is that anytime we feel ourselves being pulled forward, we have to rock up onto our elbow. If my hand was on this hip, it's even better, it's easier, but we're going to assume that my hand was on this hip. So as Stefan tilts forward, I pull myself up and my thigh replaces my shin. If I just remove my shin, Stefan can remove his ankle. So I need to maintain, that was artfully done, I have to maintain this wedging pressure where my thigh replaces as I build up and I'm grabbing his hip. So here when I connect to my, I connect my hands, if I'm still holding his hip, let's rotate a little bit this way. When I connect my hands, if I'm still holding his hip here, great, I'm in business. I'm just gonna tilt him right down to his back. That's kind of like the double version that we're talking about. But when we get to here, as I come up, before I'm able to like connect my hands, if you start turning into me, yeah, exactly. I have to retreat. I'm gonna keep my leg pinning around or trapping around your ankle, and I'm gonna keep my hand on your hip, and I'm gonna draw back into that style of single. So the kind of the mistake people make here is when someone turns, they keep trying to drive forward, and because your leg is still wrapped around, you don't have any base behind you. So if I start driving here like this, and my foot is at this angle, your body's in front of me, you're pushing me to a dead angle, I get knocked down.
So then where do you move your leg? And then we'll do it again with me.
So I'm gonna move, it's not so much my leg, as I'm gonna move my hand.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna retreat and change the angle while drawing your leg away from your body. So I'm just reactivating the lever mechanic. So again, everything's easier if I'm holding this hip. Because if you tilt forward, you end up pulling me up, and I'm already gripping around the front of your hip. So like if your knee drops, I attack your back. If you stay standing, I just draw your leg away, and you're gonna have to sit because I'm holding your hip, I'm encircling it. That's when life is easy. But let's assume that we get here, we're on this hip, you tilt forward, I drop, I drive my thigh in. You turn, I base, I draw your leg back, using this kind of like donkey kick motion. And it's really important here that I don't end up with my shoulder on your abdomen eating an omoplata. As I'm bringing you down, my elbow is collapsing to the inside of your hip line, and I'm ready to move. You can move into like over-under style passing. You can kick your leg out and do like a kneeling X pass kind of variation. I believe it's like the Superman motion that you like. There's a few different things you can do, but you just don't want to have somebody turning, setting their base in this direction against you while you have no base behind you. Withdraw your hand, scoot your knee back, and then pull them down. And then again, like I know these aren't like classic double or singles, they're just a version of a single leg takedown and a version of a double leg takedown, just because we're controlling.
That would never work in collegiate wrestling.
Probably, yeah, no, probably not, right? Like we have to, like I'm quite willing to concede that the wrestling that we do is functional for no-gi submission grappling, in much the same way that there's a lot of stuff that's functional in wrestling that's not at all functional in jiu-jitsu. You know, like you do this in jiu-jitsu, you get choked, but that doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't make it mechanically incorrect, right? So there are things that we can pull off because of the threat of certain submissions, certain movements, certain transitions that will be valid, that wouldn't be valid in a pure wrestling context. The same way that there are things that you can do in MMA, in striking, that wouldn't be valid in a pure striking context because you can't make someone drop their hands with the threat of a double, and so on and so on. So like again, like fair point to anybody who's going to criticize my wrestling, it ain't the best. But it's pretty functional for let's say a pretty high level of no-gi grappling. I've trained people who've competed at ADCC trials, hit multiple takedowns, in a pretty wrestling-based tournament. So I think, as long as I'm realistic about what my ceiling is, I'm comfortable teaching some takedown stuff.
Alright, most of the time when you want to attack the legs, you need to get inside position. When we say inside position, we mean like, double butterfly hooks, anything where I'm able to draw myself in and start to entangle the leg. This is an exception to that, and this also happens to be maybe my favorite NoGi DLR guard technique. I've been working on this for years. My coach, my teacher, my instructor, probably one of my idols, I guess, Kai Otera, invented this as far as I know, and certainly perfected it and has hit it in competition on numerous occasions, in particular against quite larger opponents. Like he's hit this in absolute divisions against guys with, and he is a small dude who's fueled entirely by Skittles and Coca-Cola. So there's not a strength element to what he's doing. So let's actually turn a little bit here. From the De La Riva guard, whether I've got my butterfly hook in or not, let's just do it with my foot down for now. I'm gonna drop the De La Riva hook. So generally speaking, when we drop the De La Riva hook, we usually want a placeholder behind the knee. So this is often how I will do it. However, as a target of opportunity, if I can lace around the ankle, I may not need to do this. But this is like as a guideline, just try to make sure that you're doing this, because anytime we drop our De La Riva hook, the possibility of someone turning and fleeing exists. So I don't want to be trying to do this if that's a possibility. If somebody's really stationary and maybe kind of leaning forward, and I know I can do this without this, like I said, it's possible, but for now, let's do this. My De La Riva hook drops, and I need to abduct my hip slightly while maintaining a bit of a curl so that my hand can now migrate through this space and secure onto my hip. I'm going to want to fold my wrist. This is something I normally advise against. Like in any circumstance where someone can do that, I don't want to make this shape. However, here, there's no risk of that. I'm not putting my elbow on the ground and giving you the opportunity to land on. So I'm going to fold my hand, because if I keep my wrist strong, I may not be able to
bring it up onto
my belly. Exactly. So I'm folding my hand as I abduct as I contract my lat over top of your foot and my rib cage towards your shin.
So at this point, there's still a fair bit of room.
There's still some space. If I were to just do this and try to finish, it would not work. Right. The angle is wrong. The crook of my elbow now is in the back of your knee.
You're not trying to choke my foot.
Exactly, yeah. That would, man, if I was that powerful. So what I'm going to be trying to do is adjust so that the blade of my forearm goes against your Achilles tendon, like with any other straight ankle lock. So once I've gotten myself here, I need to bring my lat on top of your foot. If I stay out here, there won't be anything pushing on the end of the lever. I need to cover this. So I get to here, and I kind of lift myself up a little bit. My foot, my right foot, the non-De La Riva hooking leg, is going to come in behind the knee as I rotate myself back to center. This is where the ankle lock's gonna start to come on. So you can feel the pressure as I'm doing it now. Depending on like how aggressive I am with this, you may be tapping halfway down as you fall, but let's just do it like a slow descent. There you go. So now you can probably feel it start to come on. Once somebody lands, I need to make sure that my leg is curling. I'll ease up on the pressure so I can demonstrate. That my leg is curling underneath. If I can return to the De La Riva guard, I do so. Not everyone can. So one of the follow-up motions that I use, you can see a recent example of this from Craig Jones in Quintet against Boogeyman, Richie Martinez, where he turns all the way over on his side and puts his foot on Richie's abdomen and finishes from here. I have grown to favor turning on my side, partially because I'm not super flexible and I can't get my De La Riva hook. However, you have to be aware, and this is I did some troubleshooting with Kyle about this, that the thread of the leg drag here, if this foot gets turned across, there's a possibility that once your knee goes free, I'm in a lot of trouble. So we need to know to like release or reset before that. However, if I am able to maintain the De La Riva hook and I get back to here, it's quite a bit stronger. Right? So again,
It
just
comes on super fast.
super fast. Again, this is based on Kaio's advice. Returning to center is extremely powerful. If you don't have the leg dexterity to maintain the control, and this is where we kind of get into a bit of troubleshooting, which is if we end up here and you grab my foot and pull it up, right? That's going to negate the lock. If I
Because
can't,
this provides a counter pressure.
exactly. If I'm not using my hamstring to push down on your shin to like we're creating a fulcrum and we're pushing on the end of the lever here, right? That fulcrum is behind your Achilles tendon near the ankle joint. So if I'm not able to do that because you're pulling up, it's going to negate the technique. We're going to have a simple follow-up for when that occurs in a later video, but just kind of know that if you're not able, like if I can do this, you're not pulling my leg up. If I can't do this, if my foot ends up here, it's very important to start covering your own foot by turning on the side, using effectively like I'm using your hip to cover my foot. So now if you go to pull it, it's really damn difficult. I can just turn that way.
Perfect.
And then again, make sure that this foot does not migrate. All right, so whether it's stepping on the abdomen, I prefer to try to hook it, but you can't find a much better example than Craig Jones of executing leg locks. So
to knock me over though from that, it's just the same Kazuchi.
it's the initial aspect of this might be I push, and as you come back in, I turn. And I'm usually putting my foot in base here to enable the turn, because if I attempt to stay here and try to move, it's a little bit awkward. So I'm often putting my foot in base to shoot the actual attack. And then I'm resetting myself, using this, pulling myself underneath. Again, it's super important that I cover the top of the foot and that my hand is secure, like, let's get a little bit technical. Radius, ulna, right? So my ulnar bone is resting on my hip, because if it's short of the hip, enough pressure here will fold my hand. So depending on how weak, strong, whatever my arms are, if I don't create this ulnar bone against the hip bone sort of effect, I'm somewhat vulnerable to an overwhelming amount of pressure, freeing that. So once I'm here, I'm good. You can certainly add this. It's certainly not wrong to do it, especially once we've kind of like, so as I've recentered myself, that's what's dropping me. If I want to add this now, it certainly strengthens the lock. I find with any of these kinds of techniques, like if you can develop them with one hand and get reliable taps in training with one hand, then adding the second hand is great. If you start out with one hand, you may be compensating a little bit for strength in certain areas, so I really recommend getting the finish with one hand. Always do it with one hand, and when I roll and I get finishes, it's almost always with one hand. I don't have to add the second hand, but high level competition and all that kind of stuff, you probably need to break someone's foot, so you can certainly add the second hand at that point. Alright, most of the time when you want to attack the legs, you need to get inside position. When we say inside position, we mean like double butterfly hooks, anything where I'm able to draw myself in and start to entangle the leg. This is an exception to that, and this also happens to be
maybe my favorite, NoGi DLR guard technique. I've been working on this for years. My coach, my teacher, my instructor, probably one of my idols, I guess, Kai Otera, invented this as far as I know, and certainly perfected it and has hit it in competition on numerous occasions, in particular against quite larger opponents. Like he's hit this in absolute divisions against guys with, and he is a small dude who's fueled entirely by Skittles and Coca-Cola. So there's not a strength element to what he's doing. So let's actually turn a little bit here. From the De La Riva guard, whether I've got my butterfly hook in or not, let's just do it with my foot down for now. I'm gonna drop the De La Riva hook. So generally speaking, when we drop the De La Riva hook, we usually want a placeholder behind the knee. So this is often how I will do it. However, as a target of opportunity, if I can lace around the ankle, I may not need to do this. But this is like as a guideline, just try to make sure that you're doing this, because anytime we drop our De La Riva hook, the possibility of someone turning and fleeing exists. So I don't want to be trying to do this if that's a possibility. If somebody's really stationary and maybe kind of leaning forward, and I know I can do this without this, like I said, it's possible, but for now, let's do this. My De La Riva hook drops, and I need to abduct my hip slightly while maintaining a bit of a curl, so that my hand can now migrate through this space and secure onto my hip. I'm going to want to fold my wrist. This is something I normally advise against. Like in any circumstance where someone can do that, I don't want to make this shape. However, here, there's no risk of that. I'm not putting my elbow on the ground and giving you the opportunity to land on. So I'm going to fold my hand, because if I keep my wrist strong, I may not be able to
bring it up onto your
bring
belly.
it up onto my belly. Exactly. So I'm folding my hand as I abduct as I contract my lat over top of your foot and my rib cage towards your shin.
So at this point, there's still a fair bit of room.
There's still some space. If I were to just do this and try to finish, it would not work. Right. The angle is wrong. The crook of my elbow now is in the back of your knee.
You're not trying to choke my foot.
Exactly, yeah. That would, I mean, man, if I was that powerful. So what I'm going to be trying to do is adjust so that the blade of my forearm goes against your Achilles tendon, like with any other like straight ankle lock. So once I've gotten myself here, I need to bring my lat on top of your foot. If I stay out here, there won't be anything pushing on the end of the lever. I need to cover this. So I get to here, and I kind of lift myself up a little bit. My foot, my right foot, the non-De La Riva hooking leg, is going to come in behind the knee as I rotate myself back to center. This is where the ankle lock's going to start to come on, so you can feel the pressure as I'm doing it now. Depending on like how aggressive I am with this, you may be tapping halfway down as you fall, but let's just do it like a slow descent. There you go. So now you can probably feel it start to come on. Once somebody lands, I need to make sure that my leg is curling. I'll ease up on the pressure so I can demonstrate. That my leg is curling underneath. If I can return to the De La Riva guard, I do so. Not everyone can. So one of the follow-up motions that I use, you can see a recent example of this from Craig Jones in a quintet against Boogeyman, Richie Martinez, where he turns all the way over on his side and puts his foot on Richie's abdomen and finishes from here. I have grown to favor turning on my side, partially because I'm not super flexible and I can't get my De La Riva hook. However, you have to be aware, and this is I did some troubleshooting with Kyle about this, that the thread of the leg drag here, if this foot gets turned across, there's a possibility that once your knee goes free, I'm in a lot of trouble. So we need to know to like release or reset before that. However, if I am able to maintain the De La Riva hook and I get back to here, it's quite a bit stronger. Right? So again, just
It comes on super fast.
super fast. Again, this is based on Kyo's advice. Returning to center is extremely powerful. If you don't have the leg dexterity to maintain the control, and this is where we kind of get into a bit of troubleshooting, which is if we end up here and you grab my foot and pull it up, right? That's going to negate the lock. If I
because
can't,
this provides a counter pressure.
exactly. If I'm not using my hamstring to push down on your shin to, like, we're creating a fulcrum and we're pushing on the end of a lever here, right? That fulcrum is behind your Achilles tendon near the ankle joint. So if I'm not able to do that because you're pulling up,
it's going to negate the technique. We're going to have a simple follow-up for when that occurs in a later video, but just kind of know that if you're not able, like if I can do this, you're not pulling my leg up. If I can't do this, if my foot ends up here, it's very important to start covering your own foot by turning on the side, using effectively like I'm using your hip to cover my foot. So now if you go to pull it, it's really damn difficult. I can just turn that way.
Perfect.
And then again, make sure that this foot does not migrate. All right, so whether it's stepping on the abdomen, I prefer to try to hook it, but you know, you can't find a much better example than Craig Jones of executing leg locks. So
to knock me over though from that, it's just the same Kazuchi.
It's the initial aspect of this might be I push, and as you come back in, I turn. And I'm usually putting my foot in base here to enable the turn, because if I attempt to stay here and try to move, it's a little bit awkward. So I'm often putting my foot in base to shoot the actual attack. And then I'm resetting myself, using this, pulling myself underneath. Again, it's super important that I cover the top of the foot and that my hand is secure, like, let's get a little bit technical. Radius, ulna, right? So my ulnar bone is resting on my hip, because if it's short of the hip, enough pressure here will fold my hand. So depending on how, weak, strong, whatever my arms are, if I don't create this ulnar bone against the hip bone sort of effect, I'm somewhat vulnerable to an overwhelming amount of pressure, freeing that. So once I'm here, I'm good. You can certainly add this. It's certainly not wrong to do it, especially once we've kind of like, so as I've recentered myself, that's what's dropping me. If I want to add this now, it certainly strengthens the lock. I find with any of these kinds of techniques, like if you can develop them with one hand and get reliable taps in training with one hand, then adding the second hand is great. If you start out with one hand, you may be compensating a little bit for strength in certain areas, so I really recommend getting the finish with one hand reliably in training before moving on to adding it. So like when you watch me demonstrate it, I almost always do it with one hand, and when I roll and I get finishes, it's almost always with one hand. I don't have to add the second hand. But high level competition and all that kind of stuff, you probably need to break someone's foot. So you can certainly add the second hand at that point. Okay, one of the issues you're gonna have when attacking the Kyotera ankle lock is your partner is occasionally gonna turn their knee in. When I say turn their knee in, what I mean is, as long as Matt's knee is kind of squared up here, I have a shot at a finish. But if he turns his knee in, it's gonna turn his ankle into a configuration where I'd be trying to like break his shin bone in half with the meat of my forearm. That's just not going to happen. Right? However, he is exposing the angle to his back. We kind of talked a little bit earlier about the idea of not trying to chase your opponent with like grip of one leg, like keep going that way, like run away from me, Matt. If I just keep holding on, he'll eventually break free and I'll lose him. So don't think that you can recover this. Once, like the whole point of maintaining the De La Riva ankle lock pressure is using the bottom of my hamstring against the wide, flat surface of his shin. So turn your knee in now. It's tricky, right? Like if I get here, it's hard to turn your knee in if I really get this deep bite where the flat of my hamstring covers your shin and embraces it. But if you get there earlier, now we're here. My immediate response is going to be to send the deep De La Riva hook in to the hip while moving from the ankle lock grip to the shin. If I catch a wrist grip here, it's super helpful. Once I've done this, I'm going to connect my foot behind your knee. Ideally, I'll be able to even lift my hips up and then do this. But let's just assume that we're not able to do that. We're going to give you a full series called the Shotgun X where we're doing that. So for now, we're here. I tried for the ankle lock. His knee is turned the wrong way. I insert the deep De La Riva hook and I X my shins. I'm going to be pulling on the end of his ankle here, trying to turn the foot. Again, it'll be very difficult for him to turn this knee without lifting his heel. So I should be able to get this at least partially off the ground and make this X. That's all I'm trying to do. When I say deep De La Riva hook, I don't mean this. Like, please do not slide yourself into a knee bar. Deep De La Riva hook is just my foot across his hip, but my knee is staying outside the line of his thighs. Bottom leg is coming in and I'm clamping my shins together over his kneecap while I make this strong X motion, and it's like I'm trying to do like a cigar cutter motion, like this on his leg. Obviously, I'm not going to cut his leg in half. So he's turned, I shoot this and I shoot this. His heel is off the ground. I may even need to assist it, and I'm pulling him to me. My knees are staying in between us. He's loaded up now on my shins. I can reach over and grab the hip this way, or I can placeholder it, grabbing the bunion and grabbing the hip this way. He's not going anywhere. The lever to his hip on the left side is controlled. The lever to his hip on this side is controlled. And he's loaded up on a frame that he's not going to be able to move through while I ratchet his hip. I'm now going to kick him out and release this grip. I've still got this hook on his leg, so he can't fully. If I were to remove this hook, he might be able to turn to face me. So I'm making sure that I keep that hook while I now set my seatbelt, attack with the motorcycle grip to the rear naked choke, set my second hook in, and then finish. Let's just give you a slightly different angle on that. So I attempt the ankle lock, he turns, I immediately go deep de la Riva, and I make the X. I'm making the X around the knees, and I'm making the X with my shin. So the X with my feet around his knee, or just above it, and the X with my shin, or like the pinch with my shin, just above his knee. I'm turning slightly. So my hips are rocking to the right, while my left knee pushes into the pit of his knee, and I pull him to me, loading him up, grab his hip, or switch and grab his hip. It's kind of whatever's available. Now that he's loaded, I extend him out, still keeping this hook strong. Now I insert my right hook, seatbelt, motorcycle grip if it's available, rear naked choke if it's available, hook if it's available, body triangle if it's available, like whatever works for you, whatever back attack style you favor, it should be pretty accessible to you. It's a great attack, and it's that much more versatile when you are familiar with the Mantis variation, which is like the shotgun X, which we're going to go through in a future section. But anytime somebody turns, they're giving you the angle to the back, try to exploit it. It's a great way to finish. All right, another eventuality we need to be prepared for is transitioning to outside ashi when we attempt to sweep our partner with the de la Riva ankle lock, or we attempt to finish, but they defend by pulling their leg up. So when we get into this, this Kaio style ankle lock position, I start the sweep, Matt immediately pulls my leg across. We've talked earlier about pummeling my leg inside and completing the sweep from here. However, you may have noticed there, Matt doubled up on the ankle grip. When he's got that double up, I'm not going to pummel in. Right? He's preventing, both his arms are underneath my leg. He's preventing me from dropping my leg into this space. Under these circumstances, keep in mind I'll still have a pretty strong butterfly hook here. I'm making like I'm insisting. So he's now pulling, and I'm going to go with this pull and shoot to outside ashi. My shot to outside ashi is going to involve gripping the Achilles tendon and covering the top of the foot instantly so that I'm breaking his structure. I don't want him to be able to boot, repummel, hide his heel or anything. So because he's still a little concentrated on this, I'm capturing the end of the lever here, grabbing the Achilles tendon, shooting this through, and I'm stomping both legs while I pull, and I'm contracting my heels, bringing my left heel down, bringing my right heel over top of it, and making sure to point my knee towards my partner's chest. I'm slightly bridging when I do this. I maintain control of this ankle. We'll give you another angle on this in a second. But if I let go of this, Matt can now start to turn and move himself into the defense and extract his knee. It's really important to keep control of both levers to the hip when we're transitioning into leg attacks. So right now, I've got myself here, and I'm on top of his foot. I'm going to capture the shin as I try to take my biceps and pinch the underside of his foot between my rib cage and my biceps. This allows me to create this shelf. If I were to reach too far, hide your heel, that makes it really tricky. This grip and this pressure makes it harder now. So now go to hide your heel. If I let go, hide your heel. There you go. By gripping on top of the shin here, and that's not just on top of the shin, like I'm trying to grab around to the calf muscle in the back and turn my thighs in. This makes it harder for him to hide the heel while I use the flat of my biceps here to pinch his toes and the bunion, like the big toe here, in between my ribs and that biceps. Now I turn my palm up, like I'm catching, like I'm holding a platter. I don't just stay here because still hide your heel a little bit, there we go. But if I go like this, I've created a wall between my ribs and like the heel of my palm, the ulnar bone. Now I can take this out to start connecting my hands, or even to switch, which I would recommend even more, to switch to the reverse butterfly grip. This is a very strong braking mechanic. I'm easing up with my legs because if I tighten this up, it gets a lot, well, tighter. Pinching my right thigh in, driving my left knee forward, which creates a stronger clamp at the hip. If I'm just pinching my knees here, there's some mobility you may be able to extract. But if I'm extending here, that mobility is gone. And if we add that dig, the combination of bridging in while, I'll try to go as gentle as I can, while bringing his toes towards his butt, raising my forearm towards my chin, shrugging my shoulders, and crunching. So I'm combining these motions. You can see how much Matt's foot just moved. Take that amount of force and imagine if his foot was completely trapped. And that's where you're going to get an idea of the braking mechanics. So let's just give a slightly different angle here of this transition. So if we start standing, I go for my De La Riva ankle lock, I sweep him, he pulls my leg up, I try to contract, I've already covered the foot, I shoot through, I immediately grab over top, and I pinch, shelving his heel with my palm. I'm gripping. Now I can release. I switch to the reverse butterfly grip, extend my hip and crunch. Really solid transition. Again, it does depend on your opponent to have kind of a preset response to the Kaio style ankle lock. I use this a lot because frankly, this may not come as a surprise to you, I'm not as good at the Kaio Terra ankle lock as Kaio Terra is. So I've had to develop some kind of alternate finishes. If I haven't already plugged Kaio's site, kaioterra.com, sign up for it. You can learn this ankle lock from the man himself, and hopefully you'll also get some good use out of this transition to outside ashi, and enjoy. Okay, now we need to introduce a slight variant on the NoGi De La Riva guard, which we call the De La Riva Modified X, or DMX for short. So if Matt is standing up here, the position looks like this. I've got a De La Riva hook, and I'm just crossing my ankle underneath it while pinching my shins together, surrounding his knee. The general purpose of this is to reinforce my ability to pull forward to enable my kuzushi, and it's also so that I can clamp around the knee, which helps me turn and flare that leg out. So that's kind of the idea behind it. The application where it's usually going to happen is going to be when I'm not able to put this put this foot in behind my partner's knee. So if Matt's got his foot fairly far back and he's intercepting it, then I may move to this and then start utilizing my DMX attacks. And then the other area is going to be just when I do have this butterfly hook and he moves to shed the hook. Exactly. So at this point, I need to recognize, that's back in, I need to stop, drop, shut him down, open up shop, and then you can but it's definitely the first and not the last. Alright, now we need to introduce the essential kuzushi that we'll be using when we play the DMX position. If I've started out here and Matt's blocking my leg and I'm stripping and moving in here, the first thing I'm going to do is pull forward with his wrist while pulling both of my knees towards my chest. You see how that forced Matt to take a step? There are a number of ways that I can perform that motion or perform a motion that causes him to take a step. If we have a wrist grip, we use it. We've mentioned before how it's very difficult to maintain these. So if we lose that grip and we're here, I'm going to extend away and then pull in. If I extend away at any point and he stays there, I'm going to move into that tripod sweep, which will usually cause him to start pushing back in, which again, I collect his balance, his center of gravity, his momentum, and I shift it forward. All of our kuzushis are going to be dependent on that. Settle down at a really low base, please. There you go. This makes it very difficult to pull someone forward. If his hips are kind of above his knee by a fair bit, then his center of gravity is going to be higher. Any pulling motion is going to be very effective. If he is settling down into low base, any pulling motion is unlikely to be effective. But you'll notice that my foot is closer to his crotch. So now I'll start pushing back. Once that lever effect occurs, I'm going back to that kuzushi. We will be using this kuzushi constantly to try to catch that far ankle. All right? And when we catch that far ankle, we'll go through the follow through on the sweep in the next video. But when we catch this far ankle, we'll be using that kind of taint sweep, kicking. And that should bring us to the next video. Okay, now that you understand the Kuzushi, let's just finish that taint sweep. We've kind of given you a similar view on this in a previous volume. So if I've connected my ankles, I've connected my shins, my partner's low, I kick him back, I pull him back in. I create that predictable step with my right foot. Now the bottom of the X hook. In the previous version when we just did the NoGi DLR one, we're using the edge of our foot only. In this one, my right foot is reinforcing, so I'm able to be a little bit more powerful. I catch the ankle here, and I'm just gonna continue leg pressing while I draw this towards me. That's gonna set my partner down. I'm controlling both ankles. I withdraw, pummel in, still keeping my foot gas pedaling on his crotch. I wanna make sure that I'm not extending my foot this way, because he'll be able, now we've got a lever battle. I make sure that I'm burying my heel, sinking that. So now if you go to pull up, nothing's happening. I tilt, technical stand up to my elbow, tuck the heels in towards my partner's butt, and initiate my passing. There is one eventuality here that we need to consider, which is that we may have to rotate our partner's hips the other way. So if we get here, he gets low, I push him, I pull him, I float him. When I go to kick, if I go to move this way, and he just keeps, he keeps walking, I may need to take him over my other shoulder. It's the same motion, it's just instead of going to my right shoulder, I go to my left. I'm just gonna technical stand up in the opposite direction, keeping this leg trapped the whole time. Bring this knee up, and be ready to move into my passing from here. This is actually a superior option for me because it keeps his leg extended, whereas the previous one, I ended up with his guard in front of me with a set of frames. With this one, I've got one of his potential frames and hooks trapped, and I've got the ability to kind of double up and move into some pretty strong passing. So if somebody does at any point start walking themselves back, so I go here, I move to the DMX, I go here, I'm trying to push this way, I just change direction and roll. You'll feel it because your partner will be feeding it to you. You won't have to force it, they'll be walking their hands in this direction, and you're just gonna go from here to here over your shoulder, roll up, come up. So if you've never done that kind of back shoulder roll or like partial Granby type inversion, you're gonna need to work on that a little bit to complete this. Always keep both levers to the hip until you come up on top and are ready to initiate your passing. If you let go early at any point, you're releasing the control, allowing your partner to technical stand up. I know I beat this point to death in a lot of my videos, but I still see people all the time, even at my academy after a year of training, they get a little lazy, they get a little complacent, they sweep someone, they let go. Do not let go until you solidify your control and you won't have any problems. Okay, an eventuality we need to cover is when we use the DMX position, we start moving somebody around, particularly if you've loaded them up and swept them a couple times with that taint sweep. It's been my experience that human beings don't like feet being jammed into their crotch very much, so they may elect to drop to their butt. So if we started with the DMX and he just chooses to sit to his hip, like this is not an uncommon scenario to have happen, we're gonna move into the berimbolo. There's a couple of things we need to be aware of. If you can get a grip on the wrist, cool, go ahead and keep it, that's fine. If you can't because someone's really strong here, we're gonna be gripping the lat. I've gone from the X position to my foot kind of hooking on the hip here and moving in behind my partner's knee. That's gonna give me the base I need to invert. I'm also pulling with the grip on his lat and the grip on his heel here as I invert. My knee here is going shallow for now, so like my right knee, the one that wasn't in the DLR guard, is going shallow because if my leg gets too extended and Matt traps my knee, there's a potential that I'm gonna be dealing with some reversals, some like lever-based controls, so I want to make sure to deny him that. So I got myself here, I start to invert a bit shallow, and now I'm going to make this transfer where I'm going to reach through and grab the hip, on the far side, reach through and grab the knee. My right leg, and this is an innovation that Matt brought to my attention, so like Matt basically taught this to me. So you notice that a lot of the better bolo guys really make an effort to kick their partner's shoulder down to the mat. This really sets me up now to use the scissor wedge to the twister hook to the back. So if you ever want to learn a lot about like berimbolo, inversions, back takes, this is the guy to go to. We've kind of cooperated on like fleshing out some Baramola stuff, but he's been the driving force behind it. I've only plugged in a couple of elements that have been helpful. So check out his school. Who knows, there may even be an instructional in the works on that material. So once again, I go to the DMX. He sits to his butt. I immediately catch through here or catch through here. I extend my foot onto his hip and behind his knee. So I'm keeping good control, but my knees are always shallow enough that I'm not being pulled into any kind of leg entanglement. I start to invert, and now I start kicking at that shoulder. I'm grabbing the hip. I'm pushing this knee with my left leg, like my hamstring, pushing into the pit of his knee, and my right knee is biting his hip so that I can create this strong wedge mechanic here. I come through, and I catch this arm if possible. If it's glued tight to his body, I'll come over top of the biceps. I'll step on the pit of his knee, or if I have the dexterity to just switch, I do it. This allows me to extend, scoot back, start to attack the neck, set my hook in. One thing that's important, and we'll give you kind of like a continuous motion version of this. One thing that's important, so if we start standing, is if we've tried to use the X gon' give it to you, and it doesn't work, and he sits to his butt, fuck waiting for you to get it on your own. X don't deliver to you, and then we finish from here.
All right, so now that we've gone through our major attacks and sweeps in this section, we want to add a little bit of troubleshooting. When we say troubleshooting, the main responses that your opponent is going to give you are going to be posting on the floor or posting on your knee, and then occasionally they'll drop to their combat base. So just to quickly show that, so most of our attacks are coming from here or here, we're moving the person around. This is what we say when we mean active posting. So when someone starts posting and I'm not able to knock them over, we're gonna have some responses, and then an extremely common response to the De La Riva guard is for someone to push that knee down. All right, so we wanna address those things. Just make sure you have some answers. This is actually where more of our submission threats are gonna come from, because, well, other than the coyote or ankle lock, if somebody's really postured up, there's not a whole lot you can do to them submission. So our submissions are going to come more out of the troubleshooting section than the other stuff. All right, our first sort of troubleshooting issue that we're likely to have is somebody posting on our De La Riva knee. So let's get one of an angle here. So somebody posts and locks their elbow out exactly. What they're trying to do is shed the hook. If they're able to maintain this, obviously they're externally rotating my hip, putting some stress on my groin. I'm not going to be able to play effectively from here. I don't wait until this has occurred. At this point, if I try to strip this grip, it's unlikely to be as successful because he's starting to sink his weight in. And as he starts to control the rest of my hip, yeah, like he's fully into a passing engagement now. I've got to abandon, go to frames. So as soon as somebody posts on my knee, I'm accelerating it. I don't resist. What I want to do is capture the wrist here, Y block, hook, and I'm simultaneously extending and pulling. This is going to perform two functions. For one, I want to connect to an omoplata here. If I just break this and he goes the elbow connection, that omoplata opportunity is gone. So I want to make sure that I'm drawing this away and accelerating by rowing, bringing his arm or his hand like to my ribs and connecting it to my body while pushing this away, and then raising my leg immediately, bringing my thigh into his armpit. I don't just want to go break and now try to shoot an omoplata without there being some kind of additional compromising of his alignment. So I'm here, he pushes, he posts on the knee. 1, 2, I'm blocking that space. He can't go knee elbow connection. This is also allowing me to prevent his hand from coming down. If we end up here, this is not an omoplata. This is him ducking under my leg and potentially coming on a leg drag on the other side. So I want to maintain the elevation of my hip so that as I push into him, I can transfer his hand into my back pocket. I can start to use, like in the gi, you would use more of this like chopping down on the back of the shoulder style omoplata. In no-gi, I more try to, and just in general, I mostly try to rotate my knee in this way. This is forcing him to roll. As he rolls, I withdraw my leg. So my shin is coming into his armpit. I still have full tension on his wrist, attempting to draw it back to me. I will now release this because I've slowed the roll down. I will release it and capture his elbow. You'll notice that my thigh came in behind
his arm, trapping it. So my shin is pinching his shoulder. It's extending, pinning his shoulder to the mat. Try to pull your elbow back now. Like if he's super greasy, he might get out, but once I reinforce this, I should be okay. I'm gonna grab the meat of the thumb, rotate it down, bridge in, keeping my hand on the bottom of the elbow for additional friction, and basically making like the bro handshake, like you son of a bitch from Predator kind of motion here. I can triangle my legs if necessary and add my foot in base to the bridge. If my foot's not in base, it's nowhere near as powerful as if I can lift there. Right? So that's just a kind of a bonus finish for you. You can certainly, let's just give a different angle, you can certainly just use the omoplata to come up on top. So if we ever end up here, Buddy starts to do this, we kick, we start to do that, he starts to roll, we just come up on top using the omoplata, withdraw, he'll yank his arm out, we'll end up on top of side control, cross face, all that good stuff that you should know how to do by now. If not, investigate the Top Game formula at grapplearts.com. But this is a really good solution. Frankly, one of the major issues you're going to be constantly running into with the De La Riva guard in no-gi, even in the gi, is just that hand posting on your knee. If you don't have a good answer for it, and this is pretty much the easiest, best answer, it's going to force people to posture up constantly and yank their arm out. So even if you do not succeed, if all that happens is he posts, I go like this, he withdraws his arm, we're right back to our regular attacks. So if you never get the main problems that you run into when playing the NoGi De La Riva guard. Following up on our omoplata, dealing with posting on the knee, we want to address what's going to happen when we achieve a kazushi or a partial sweep, or just even the thread of a sweep, and somebody either bases down on their knee or bases down on their hands, but their head is kind of low. So let's say, for example, I collect, this sort of thing is happening. I miss my shot at the ankle, and just you can stay up on one foot for now. I've missed my shot at the ankle, so I can't finish the taint sweep. I can try to move him, but unless I get this secondary lever, I'm not going to be able to finish. However, the only reason he's not falling right now is because both his hands are on the ground. If he takes one of his hands away, let's say he takes this hand away, I can pretty much just push him over. So he has to keep his hands there. Let's just kind of establish our terms. As long as I am continuing this pressure, his hands have to stay here. I'm going to, because I can't catch this, I'm going to start to sit up and rotate in base. Again, as long as I'm turning my shin in like this and kind of messing with him, kicking at him, he has to keep his hands here, and now I can collect his head. If his hand is on this side, we're going to go over a variation in a minute where his hand isn't here, but his hand is on this side. When I collect his chin, I'm just going to connect my hands right away, and I want to bring my rib cage right up against his triceps. Right there. I'm rowing and closing my elbow to my ribs. I'm keeping this like a half guard hook. I'm keeping this leg over his back. I'm performing this motion. It's basically a high elbow guillotine motion without the ability to bring the forearm in front to block. So again, I've managed to tilt my partner. There we go. As soon as I have the chin, I just make sure that I bring my rib cage right into his armpit. Let's just turn actually. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Perfect. I make sure to bring my rib cage right into this space. Once I connect this, I'm good. I'm just going to make sure I've got knee-elbow connection so that as I drop back, he doesn't have the option of hopping to the other side. If I were to drop this, this is no good, obviously. So I'm always coming back with this knee-elbow connection. If he starts lifting his hips, I'm just going to tilt him over and move into the anaconda choke. We don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of front headlock, anaconda, Darce style attacks. Suffice to say, there's some really good information out there that you can utilize and really good resources. But as long as, if you want to explore that, but as long as we're here and I connect my knee elbow connection, I'm grabbing my wrist bone, not my hand. So I'm grabbing the ulna because I want to pull on the direct lever. I don't want to create any shear on my wrist by pulling on my hand. So I kind of use the middle finger as an indicator right into this divot here. And I bring my pointer finger, trigger finger, around the base of the ulna. I'm rowing up, bringing my elbow to my hip, and compressing with my ribs against my partner's triceps, attempting to internally rotate his shoulder into his neck. Right here. I'm crunching down and I'm covering the hip. So that's our version where our partner stays on their hands but doesn't drop their knee. In the case of somebody responding to all this by dropping this knee down, this hand will not usually be posted over here because now he knows that I'm probably gonna take his back or do whatever. So it'll usually be somebody turned this way. Again, I'm gonna use this kind of dick post motion here to set up a high elbow guillotine. It's quite common in this knee down position for somebody to be like, you know, gripping, hand fighting, all this kind of stuff. We can take an underhook and just sweep our partner into the guillotine control position, roll back into the mount to finish, come up into any number of positions to finish. It's not incumbent on you to finish the guillotine. You just need to recognize that anytime somebody puts their knee down and their head is at your shoulder level roughly, like if I can see any part of the top of his head, I can immediately connect to the guillotine here. I'm catching that chin strap. If his hand comes in to hand fight, I'll just take the overhook and use the arm in guillotine, which will be the same basic mechanism as before, crunching in with my elbow while rolling the wrist bone up into his throat. Again, don't want to go down a rabbit hole of chokes. We've got an entire guillotine control module on bjjconcepts.net. It's like, I think over 30 videos, just all on controlling, accessing, finishing the guillotine. So if you're inclined to look that up, there's also a whole bunch of other really good products out there you can check out. Anytime somebody bases down and exposes their neck to the point where your shoulder line is in line with their neck, or you can see the top of their head, and you're not doing this, just post down on your knee again. We're not doing this. I'm never exposing internal rotation of the shoulder to go for a guillotine. It's always got to be a nice, natural, clean motion where my elbow can cover your head without exposing a lever that he can dive through for his arm triangle. So we don't make this shape, we make this shape, and we cup the neck or the head in our armpit, maintaining our own alignment, taking advantage of broken posture and broken alignment on my partner's. Or because of my partner's error in broken alignment, that's when I can attack. If I don't do that, just because you're trying to get a submission where it's not there. Another potential attack that you can unleash against somebody who's using active posting in response to your NoGi DLR guard is the triangle. So when we end up with somebody who isn't putting their knee down, but they are putting one hand on the mat. Now, this is the scenario we're talking about here. This is usually only going to work if I've got this leg in the air. Like if this foot is in base, there's just no way that I'm going to be able to break his alignment enough to shoot this triangle. I have to have elevated this leg, and this hand has to be posted. The next thing that needs to happen here is obviously I need to catch this wrist. And then the mistake that people make here is they shoot this part of the triangle first. I need to expose this elbow using that same motion that I did for the omoplata. But in this case, I'm also going to be extending this leg away, keeping his weight that way. See how Matt had to move his arm? If he can start bringing his hand closer to me, he's going to jam me up on my triangle. So as I keep extending away and pulling, I'm also going to transition to this attack if I'm not able to do this. If anytime, let's say he just cups my hip really tight. Yeah, exactly. So now I'm hanging, and then I'll pull him in. Notice how I broke Matt's posture by pulling my thigh towards me, turning him this way. Now I'll grab the head and close the triangle. I'll immediately hook underneath the arm, turn to a perpendicular angle, squeeze to finish. I'm not going to go through too many details on finishing the triangle. There probably isn't a better resource on triangles than Ryan Hall's Triangles. Search that out. It's a fantastic instructional. Get it. Your triangles will go through the roof. But the essential idea is that we're trying to rotate the shoulder into the neck. Make sure that we use our hamstring against the side of the neck, our calf against the back of the neck, and we're bringing our knee towards our partner's head, breaking their posture, and then clamping down. I also want to try to make sure that my hip is moving out. Let's rotate a little bit this way. If my partner can keep his shoulder closed, I can squeeze my balls off, nothing's gonna happen. If I make that adjustment, and all I did there was I scooped his hip up, I scooped his elbow up using my hip, internally rotating the shoulder, creating this vulnerable angle. As I clamp down, you can usually finish without even closing the triangle if you do this properly. So as long as you recognize posture control is an essential element, some kind of hook here under the leg or here under the arm to prevent them from deadlifting you in like rampage style against a Rona, slamming you into the ground, and making sure that your hip is angling outwards and not getting buried. If his elbow goes to the mat here, I may not be able to finish on the triangle. I may, but it's gonna be a battle. Here, if his elbow can't reach the mat, as soon as I start to squeeze, the triangle is on. So just slightly different angle from the De La Riva again. I managed to imbalance him, he posts his hand on the mat. I get a grip, I shoot this through, and I keep extending with my right shin so he has to move his base to his left to prevent himself from tipping over. If you keep your hand over here, if I do this, I'm gonna rotate him into the omoplata unless he moves his hand. So he's gotta move his hand a little bit, that's when I collect the triangle. Notice I'm still holding onto his leg. I switch to the shin or the head, I switch to underneath the arm. Close the triangle, squeeze. My knee is hitting him in the head. It's that that cigar cutter or scissoring sort of motion where I'm stomping, curling, bringing my knee in to trap everything, and then clamping over my shin, not over my foot, making sure I'm connected to the lever, not toe holding myself. I don't want to activate a lever that affects my joint. I want to activate a lever that compresses somebody's neck into the choke. So again, really good troubleshooting thing. Somebody posts their hand, and if you want more details on the triangle, Ryan Hall's Triangle Instructional. Okay, our next troubleshoot is going to be the combat base. And so like we've talked a little bit earlier about how somebody might be standing and start to drop to their knee, but this is almost like as soon as I get my De La Riva, they sit to their knee, or frankly, I'm on my back and I'm dealing with a kneeling passer, and no, it's like a one knee down, yeah, like somebody who just enters your guard like this, and you've got your De La Riva hook in, and now the DMX isn't going to be enough to float him, right? My kind of taint sweep motions aren't necessarily going to be enough because he's going to be strong on this lead leg. Exactly. So if somebody's center of gravity is so low that I can't move him forward, I can't move him backwards, I'm going to immediately shoot my deep De La Riva hook to the side of his hip and bring my bottom leg in and create what's basically like De La Riva X, right? So like in the gi, you would see people utilizing the sleeve grips. You couldn't have a long sleeve rash guard. So some kind of sleeve grips and then just tilting somebody over and coming up on top. Clearly I don't have that luxury of NoGi. I'm never going to be able to maintain a De La Riva X with like double wrist control. He's going to break free. So as soon as I elect to move to here and here, I'm going to sit myself up. Right? If he goes to push me down, he's giving me his center of gravity. So generally speaking, somebody who's a little more experienced is not going to do that. They're going to recognize that this kind of double lever control, because I've got the lever to his hip here, and I've got the lever to his hip here. This needs to be untangled before he proceeds forward. And just because of the strength of the entanglement combined with my core sitting myself up, I don't need to have my hands behind me. And if I do put them behind me, I'm going to be doing it to shift my base while keeping my knees pinched. So now I go to correct your knee. It's pretty tough, right? Like once I get to this angle, he's got to keep turning. So as soon as I sit myself up, my next step is just to kind of figure out what's going on here. If this hand is in my way, I might use a 2-on-1 control and then grab his head. If this hand is not in my way, let's say he's trying to push my leg down, right? I'm just gonna grab the back of his neck and tilt him down. I might also be able to grab the back of his neck from this side. It doesn't matter how I achieve it. I just want to get his head down so that I'm hanging off of it, forcing his hands to the mat. I'm gonna switch hands now. I'm gonna start to tilt him over. I'm still covering his posture. I'm gonna keep my top, like the De La Riva leg hook, by his hip, and it's gonna migrate down to his knee while I withdraw. Let's just turn. When I say withdraw, my bottom leg from the De La Riva X is going to come out while I'm controlling his posture. You notice how Matt as well, you might not notice because it's not necessarily visually apparent.
He's starting to drift this way already. He feels like he knows I'm taking him this way, so he's starting to drift that way. As he does, I take his neck and I take the high elbow guillotine. I may be able to finish right here, or he might roll. So if I can't finish here because he rolls, I'm gonna go with it and advance into the mount, hipping in. Again, this isn't the time for a guillotine instructional, but high elbow goes over the head. I'm curling my heels in behind, closing my elbow, posting my head on the mat, and I'm hipping in to finish. So my hip is aiding the blade of my forearm going into the side of his neck. So if at any point we find ourselves with a knee-based passer, deep del hiva immediately, hands if necessary, one hand if necessary, constantly trying to deal with this breaking posture. If he pulls away from this, 2-on-1 grip, 2-on-1 grip here, starting to move my partner around, and again, back on his neck. Far hook stays in place, bottom hook retracts. I can just come up now. If I have his head covered, I can come up. His only option, potentially, is to roll into the 411. So he might try to connect to that sort of thing. I just need to know that that exists. We might end up here. I would be in very, very deep trouble if that occurred. However, it's a super obvious attack. I am in base. He is not in good base. He's not in good posture. As he rolls through, I just take my leg out. He swept himself, I'm now on top. So don't worry about the 411 from there. When somebody's all bent and jacked up, they shouldn't be able to hit any kind of offense on you. You should be able to simply, anytime you're dealing with a knee passer, deep del hiva, sit up. Again, they're unlikely to push you unless they're being overly aggressive. Any push should be met by loading up and attacking the back. That's the beauty of the del hiva X style position is I control the lever to that hip, I control the lever to that hip. So any movement of the center of gravity onto this mechanism gives me the ability to keep him rotated at roughly a 90-degree angle. So I always have access to his back. And so it's unlikely, but if someone does it, just be prepared. If I sit up and he pushes, I just take him with me and load him up. I go back to this ankle control. Again, like we've kind of gone through these attacks in different videos, so I don't need to rehash it right now. If he stays put here, I'm working on his head. I take his neck. I can finish here, or if we roll, I can finish on top. If I lose the posture, I go to one hand on the neck. I go to this hand in base. This leg withdraws, preventing him from, like, try to stand right up now. No. It's stuck. As long as I'm creating this opposing effect of knee behind, so just right there, knee behind, or the pit of my knee around his ankle, and this hook combined with my knee turning forward. If I stay here like this, he can take that leg out. So I'm driving down while I drive forward. If my knee comes through, again, it's not a big deal because I know that this is coming. So as he goes to roll through, I can immediately just access that. Then I can move myself into all kinds of cool stuff. Just know that it's there. Know that the 411 entry is coming and you shouldn't have too many issues. Your leg is light. They're in broken alignment. You should be able to extract. So, well, I'm not anticipating that you'll have too many problems with it as long as you've identified the potential threat. And if they don't roll through, so if we come back to that combat base, if we find ourselves here and they don't roll through, we simply stand up, draw their leg back. They'll either post their hand, we'll attack their back, or they'll drop to their butt now and just concede the sweep. You're going to end up facing the open guard and you're going to have to initiate your passing. So it's a really strong mechanism, a few different options. You're just going to have to kind of read your opponent's reaction. Kind of like we went through earlier where you got to play a little bit of fuck you jiu-jitsu, get into the position, let your partner move around, feel where their momentum is going, feel where their alignment is going, recognize where the opportunities exist, play it like a game, don't chase one particular option, and you should be fine.